Hi, welcome back guys. This is your sensei, back with another fanfiction. This is the movie of What If Naruto Fell in Love with Alma? Now before starting, please give this video a like and subscribe to the channel if you want more videos like this. Now let's get into the fanfic. Without life there is not even a shred of fear. There can be no silence without sound. Nor can there be sound without silence. And this silence is mine. This silence is mine. Some doors should never be opened. Orochimaru had been told this many a time before, by his teachers, students, mentors, even his friends. Fools, the lot of them. He hadn't listened then, and he certainly wasn't listening now. Through years of careful if a tad questionable experimentation he had achieved much, gained much, learned much, but it was not enough. Never enough. Even his own village was merely a means to an end, a means by which he might discover new, wondrous things. Always new things. Some doors must never be opened, But such a weak sentiment he spat in the face of such a saying. For one such as him, for one who feared not the Reaper, there were always doors to opened, always new techniques to be learned. New limits to test things not only shinobi, but mankind could only dream of such as this. Life and death did not concern him, but one could learn fascinating things from the beyond. Today, he was attempting to tear apart the very fabric of reality itself. Well, perhaps that was too strong a word. He was merely seeking to open a portal into another ether, not collapse reality. And he was so close, so very terribly, horribly close through a marvelous union of ninjutsu and technology. He devised a means to make it so, to make his gruesome dream a reality. Dozens of lives had been sacrificed, their chakran very souls used to power the amalgam of circuitry he'd cobbled together. What manner of secrets could he learn from the beyond? The possibilities were endless. Why yes, curiosity with a generous smattering of avarice, of course. It stood to reason that there were many universes beyond his own. That there were, in fact, many different realms, just as there were heaven and hell. The sly Sannin had glimpsed their depths through the occult and other, less invasive means, but he knew they existed. Worlds where gods of death cut down evil spirits in the afterlife. Lands in which warriors battled one another, in giant suits of armor. Even battles beyond the very stars themselves, where different races, some with strange bodies and stranger faces, fought equally strange, alien machines with the fate of entire worlds at stake. Indeed, there's so many, he could not hope to count them all, but it was time for greatness thanks to a few discrete gene samples taken from that QB brat, and just a touch of his tenant's chakra, it was sure to work certain, he told himself. Without life there is not even a shred of fear. Perhaps it could be said that Orochimaru wasn't truly alive, that his prideful green surpassed common sense to such a degree that he no longer feared the ramifications of his actions. This was a momentous event nonetheless, and so he had sent Kabuto away, wishing the first fruits of this new world for himself. He was alone. Thus, in his arrogance, this stupid, soulless man threw the switch. With a terrible keening sound not unlike that of a woman's wail, a blazing discus of orange/red blossomed into existence before him, hissing and spitting. He saw countless words laid out before him, but none he desired to touch, none that aroused his curiosity. And then, like a stone cast upon the water's surface, it rippled. The Sannin frowned. No, that shouldn't be possible. Something was influencing the portal, molding it to their will. Golden eyes grew wide, bulging as a small, bloody hand thrust itself into existence. What was? The portal lasted all of an instant longer, but in that instant, something came through. Orochimaru's world went sideways in a cone of fiery destruction, the lab imploding around him, a sea of shattered glass and tortured screams. Mercifully he remained conscious, though in hindsight, he almost wished he hadn't. His lab lay sprawled out before him, the test subjects little more than charred corpses in their cages. Shadows danced dimly in the broken lights, illuminating bloody smears on the wall where the more unfortunate ones had tried to escape and been ground to a fine, meaty paste. Despite himself and all he'd seen throughout his storied career, the man gagged. Moments later his stomach seemed to come to the same accord, divesting a half-eaten bit of food onto the bloody tiles at his feet. Free, where am I? Orochimaru glanced up at the sound of the voice and froze at the sight of the blood-stained specter standing before him. He was not expecting this. Skin pale as ash, eyes the color of warm honeysuckle, hair dark as night, ebon tresses the color of crow's wings, clad in a red velvet dress. He couldn't bear to look straight at her. Nay, the very act of doing so caused a massive migraine to pound at his temples. A very real trickle of fear wormed its way into his heart. This girl, what was she? Then she saw him. The little girl smiled softly, cocked her head aside, and pressed a single, solitary finger to her lips. You're going to die. Against all odds, he heard the words, though her lips did not move. A voice that sent cold fingers of dread trailing up and down his spine, a noose of ice and fire wrapping itself round his neck. He tried furtively to stand, but a bolt of agony prevented him. When he risked a glance down, he saw why. One of his legs had been shorn off just above the knee. When he tried to raise his arm, that too vanished, gone in a bloody mist. The poor man couldn't even bring himself to scream. The girl came closer. Orochimaru cringed. What are you? Alma. One moment she was a little girl, the next, a grown woman. Then a girl again. What madness was this? Were his eyes playing tricks on him, somehow? He felt oddly warm. His legs, his chest, now his arms. Why couldn't he make himself move? And oh dear sweet Cammy, what was happening? His skin was falling away. Oh, make it stop, stops. His last thought was thus. What have I unleashed? And then he only knew the abyss that he had eluded for so very long. Alma Wade stared down at the still steaming skeleton that had once belonged to the reviled member of the Sannin. She didn't know where she was. When she was. All she knew was that she was free. Free from the cold and cruel machines, the men, and their hateful experiments. She felt something then, a stirring, a curiosity, drawing her attention. It was like a scent, subtle but faint, lingering in the ashes of the lab. Whatever it was, it set her into a frenzy. Her little eyes grew wide, and a small smile blossomed on her bloody face. A tiny giggle forced itself between her lips. She'd found someone like her. That same night, miles away in the hidden leaf village Uzumaki, Naruto began to have the strangest dreams. He dreamed of this strange, silent little girl, unaware of the terror that had just become fixated upon him. It was already decided in that instant, his strange fate, sealed in the moment that Alma Wade became aware of his existence. They were each of them only 8 years old. It is the way of men to make monsters, and it is the nature of monsters to destroy their makers. The girl in red. Harlan Wade was angry. No, perhaps angry was too tame of a word. Anger implied some semblance of restraint. Of control, a control he no longer truly possessed. No, what he felt was fury, a mindless hate that defied all logic. Hate for himself, for his daughter, for his once grand dream, now an open, shattered tube, mocking him with his silence. His hand traced the empty cylinder that had once housed his eldest child, and he felt nothing. Not even so much as a hint of her psychic residue. Perhaps he did feel something. Laughter. Impossible to decipher, terribly painful to comprehend, he heard Alma's voice, delighted and maddeningly joyful, bleeding in his head. An eerie vision flashed through his head, her subsequent escape laid out before him in hated, excruciating detail. I win, Daddy, I win, she said, grinning at him, giggling. I win, I winnie. The sheer hate, the malevolent malice in her voice left no illusions as to how she felt about him, about her captivity. Almost as if she were mocking him. It lasted for all of an instant longer, just long enough to burn itself into the back of his brain, and then it was over. Wherever she was, whenever she was well and truly gone now. The only clue they had was a sudden upswing of psychic energy in the vault, of violence and insanity. Then it was over. A flash of orange light on the cameras, and then she was gone. Gone. His fists tightened around the metal shards, their jagged biting into his palms and drawing blood. There was nothing anymore. Nothing. Nothing at all, because she was gone. Alma was gone. It defied all logic and reason. One moment the facility had been perfectly secure, the next, all hell broke loose. 3 seconds. That was all it took for the safeguards to fail, for his daughter to wreak havoc and disappear. It was grisly, to say the least. Walls were painted red with blood, earthquakes rocked the building, scorched skeletons marked the last resting place of those who had simply disintegrated where they stood, dead before they could flee. They were still counting the dead and those that were injured, though it was mostly the former. All of this, from her place underground, she must have been so furious. So was he. His horn-rimmed glasses lay crushed underfoot, crunching now beneath his boot as he removed his foot. With painstaking care, Wade brushed them off and crushed the plastic into his fist. Again there was pain, but it was a good pain, one filled with promise and purpose. Direction. His children would have been gods, but without Alma there was nothing. Nothing at all. No prototypes, no grand plan, no anything. How could she, an 8-year-old girl, have escaped from the vault? She was meant to be comatose in a coma, yet something had woken her, wrested her from the chamber. No, she will not deny him his legacy in that instant. He swore he would find her. Bring her back here. He would find a way. That same night, a dimension away in the hidden leaf village Uzumaki, Naruto began to have the strangest dreams. He dreamt of this strange, silent little girl, unaware of the terror that had just become fixated upon him. It was already decided in that instant, his strange fate, sealed in the moment that Alma Wade became aware of his existence. These were his dreams. Sometimes they were painful, at others they merely made him smile, tremble in his sleep. Naruto, she would whisper sweet nothings to him while he slumbered. Naruto, are you crying, Naruto? She told him what he was in no uncertain terms, but she wasn't cruel about it. She said that he was special, unique, gifted. Oh, so very, very, very gifted indeed. He wasn't a monster. Oftentimes, her words proved more sinister. Kill them, her voice would urge, demanding the blood of all those who had tormented him over the years. Kill them all. An eye for an eye. Tooth for a tooth. Evil for evil. Blood for blood. The fox liked that. He seemed to enjoy these subtle promises of bloody retribution. But in the same vein it feared her after that first outburst, not daring to speak whenever the girl was near, always whispering death in his ear. The girl didn't like the fox at all, but her promises of vengeance never seemed to stop. Sometimes Naruto was almost tempted to listen to her. But he was a good boy at heart and tried not to. He tried to be nice, tried to fit in, to ignore the bullies and the others who hurt him. Then the mistress of the orphanage started beating him. Mistress Halsey had lost a daughter and husband both during the beast's rampage nearly 8 years before, so she, like some, harbored a special brand of hatred for the Fushine this chase, mistaken to be her young charge. She'd always loathed him, despised him, calling him demon brat or worse when the guards weren't there to watch him. She spit at him and barely fed him, treating him like less than dirt. And those were the good days. But today, on the anniversary of what had been known as the Kyuubi's death, she took it a step further. She broke out the switch. Alma didn't like that. Not one bit. From her distant place in hidden sound, she saw it all through Naruto's eyes, through the psychic link Orochimaru had unwittingly forged between them. Watched as she dared to lay hands on him. No one was allowed to touch Naruto. No one was allowed to hurt him, make him cry, make him beg for mercy. No one. In a fit of pique, she inflicted the worst torture she knew. With vindictive spite, a trickle of power flooded through her and into the boy, empowering him with all of her anger, all of her rage, all of her malice. She offered a tiny whisper, little more than a breath of sound, into his ear. Kill her. And he did. In the instant that the belt touched Naruto's back for the 5th and final time, the raving woman burst into a cloud of ash and flame. She didn't even have time to scream before the scorched bones of her body struck the floor, clattering loudly. Some of the children panicked and tried to hurt him after that, so Alma told Naruto to hurt them, too. But he didn't. To her dim say, he left them alone, just sitting there until the Umbu came. Even distant and draining as it was, she was more than capable of breaking someone like the headmistress and a few brats who didn't know their place. Unfortunately, Halsey's demise was blamed on the boy. Alma watched with a touch of dismay and just a little bit of satisfaction as he was taken away from them and sequestered, alone in the residential district. He was tendered an apartment of his own shortly afterwards, at the Hokage's expense, then placed under close personal guard by the most elite of Umbu agents. That only made the loneliness worse. Without the other children, many of whom actively shunned him now, there was only the silence as his companion. Dreams became his only solace. These strange, odd night phantoms persisted for nearly 2 solid weeks afterwards, flashes of light, sight and sound, forgotten on waking. At first, he didn't think much of them. He was but a child after all, and most children, while they find their dreams fascinating, lose interest in them all too quickly. He barely remembered the girl in his visions, the strange, simple little specter who hummed quietly to him. Sometimes she even sang. Still, he woke to that strange feeling that he'd forgotten something, failed to remember a terribly important event. Then one night the visions changed. Naruto. His eyes opened to the dream once more. As ever, the scene was much the same as before. He found himself standing near an old, hollowed-out tree, the faded remnants of a battered swing clinging to it with surprising tenacity. An audible creak-creak-creak of a sound punctuated each movement, sending it rocking to and fro. This time, however, the swing wasn't empty. Someone was sitting in it. He found that odd among other things. Whenever he dreamed, it was never so clear, so pristine, so serene. Naruto. Once, the bleak, storm-cloud sky, usually so devoid of light, was actually bright for once. And that terrified him. An eerie red sun stared down at him, bathing the hill in coruscating waves of golden amber, almost painful to look at. The cold gray heavens were nearly devoid of clouds, replaced by that eerie eye staring down at him. Part of him thought it was very pretty, the other part not so much. Naruto, the voice was louder now, frantic, almost eager even, to meet him. With growing trepidation, Naruto scaled the hill, feeling the grass tickle his bare feet as he did so. It was not an unpleasant sensation, but at the same time as if tiny razor blades were scraping across the soles. Then she saw him. The girl leapt from the swing and dashed forward at him, her dirty face alight. Naruto actually took a step back, so startled was he by her enthusiasm. Whomever she was, she looked genuinely happy to see him, which was good, he supposed, given that was quite frightening in her own right. Little red dress, bright eyes and dark hair, skin that hadn't seen the sun in an age. If she noticed his hesitation, she didn't seem to care. Indeed, she seemed too enraptured to do so. Clambering to a halt, she rocked back on the balls of her tiny feet, grinning at him. Then her hands seized his by the palms, locking him in a terrifying grip. Those golden, amber eyes blazed up at him. "Found you," she cried, delighted, bounding up and down, the motion sending her ebon tresses bouncing. "Found you, found you, found." A miasma of ecstatic emotions assailed him, accompanied by a joy so powerful it nearly brought him to his knees. But this glee felt tainted somehow, warped by an obsession so intense, he couldn't understand it. In the end, his young mind dismissed it. She was happy to see him, as was he her, and that was all that mattered. She chirped gleefully at the thought, barely able to contain herself. Happy. So happy, for a moment he thought she was going to start jumping up and down again, but Nosh seemed to have spent much of her enthusiasm in that regard. But she had other ways of showing just how overjoyed she truly was. To his disbelief, she tugged his hands and yanked him forward into a fierce hug, nuzzling her head into his chest. Purring like a contented kitten. "Never leave you again," she said, burying her face into his shoulder with fierce determination. Never. It sounded suspiciously like a vow, a promise. An oath. The bond. Nero wasn't entirely certain why she was so unsually happy, but it was certainly contagious. Yet that joy was tempered with the knowledge that this was just that, a dream. She wouldn't be here when he woke up. He would be alone. A pang of loneliness stabbed at him. In that same instant, the girl jerked back with a flinch, looking as though she'd just been slapped. By him. That pensive, pitiful expression tugged painfully at heartstrings Naruto hadn't even known were there. Why hurt? She looked so sad. Now, Naruto felt supremely stupid conversing with this dream girl, but he simply couldn't bring himself to turn and walk away from those shining orbs. Unwillingly he answered, "Yuri not real." Anger darkened her pale features, a thunderclap of annoyance drying her eyes and darkening the skies in an instant. "Yes, I am." "You are?" She nodded abruptly, her head bobbing down, then up in a jerky nod. "This beauty Yuri here," he pointed out. "In my head." "This." Again with the one-word answers. "Outside." "Too. Too then." Was she too excited to speak properly? Boyish pride thrust that thought away. "What's your name, then, Tibeo?" he sputtered, indignant. Her eyes were ablaze with sinister joy now as she beamed up at him with another eerily ominous smile. Now that he got a look at her, he realized it wasn't a trick of the light. Her legs really were covered with blood up to her knees. He could feel the miasma surround him once more, but this time he did not feel threatened in the least. It felt soothing, comforting even, as though she were trying to reassure him, somehow. Strangely enough, it worked. She said. Then, suddenly serious, she offered him her hand. "Do you want to play a game, Naruto?" "What kind of game?" Her eyes seemed to dance. "The fun kind." He eyes the limb as though it were a snake, ready to rear up and bite him at the slightest provocation. Solemnly, Alma stretched her hand out just a little further, a girlish grin of impatience betraying her otherwise quiet and diffident demeanor. Gulping, he reached out, tentatively, hesitantly, his fingertips brushing hers, then curling inwards against her own as he took her hand. Naruto yelped, his mind bleeding in agony as 1,000 images assailed him. But Alma's voice suddenly inquired, resonating within his head. "Why are they hurting me? Make it stop. Daddy, make it stop, make it stop, make it stop, 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 stop." He tugged at his arm but found himself unable to retract his hand. Likewise, Alma appeared riveted, staring at him, looking through him. What was she seeing? What was she feeling? He didn't know, and in that moment, he was in too much pain to care. He saw everything about her, and like as it was, she saw everything about him too. He also saw something else. Something that terrified him. Finally the invisible force holding him abated, and he jerked his arm free, glaring. "You killed her." They both knew to whom he spoke. Her face grew still and curiously calm for a moment. "Yes," she said at last. "I did." "Why?" "Because she hurt you." Alma cocked her head aside, trying not to let her anger show. "No one should hurt you. And I won't let them." Before he could think to stop her, the small goddess of death darted forward and laid a swift peck upon his cheek, her lips lingering for all of an instant. Then she danced away, grinning, vanishing before his very eyes. "Goodbye, Naruto." He thought her smile was the most beautiful thing in the world. They were each of them only 8 years old. If one were to look up the definition of determination in the dictionary, you would find a picture of Alma Wade. Alma Wade. This powerful emotion had defined her since the age of 3, when she first learned of her powers. When the experiments began, her hate had made her strong, determined, focused. Singular in her goal not only to try and survive, but to visit vengeance swift vengeance those who had wronged her for something she couldn't control. They said she was very, very sensitive to negative emotions. Perhaps she was. Alma didn't rightly know. But throughout all the pain, all the torture inflicted upon her, she still held onto that tiny seed of hope. Determination. It had lingered with her through all the pain, all the poking, all the prodding. She hated her mother, hated the scientists who had cut and sliced into her, hated her sister for the blessed kindness that was given, and she hated her father, Harlan Wade. Just thinking about him blended her thoughts together tunelessly. But not nearly as much as the hate she felt for these people, those who had hurt Naruto, who continued to hurt him, who enjoyed hurting him. Her rage turned everything scarlet, threatening to destroy this small apartment in which she found herself. Furniture lifted, held aloft by the sheer force of her malice. Walls trembled. The very room itself threatened to give way, come uprooted when faced with her wrath, raising such a clatter that it woke the boy she was watching. Naruto groaned on a sudden, his body tossing restlessly amidst the sheets. Azure eyes fluttered open, bleakly regarding the moonlit room. Was it? He called out, bleary with sleep. It was almost too much to pray that he didn't notice her, because, sure enough, the boy did. Those sharp eyes fastened on her. Wow, Horyu! You familiar? Alma froze, indecision gripping her heart in an icy vice. All her anger, all her hate, all her power, it just vanished when she looked into those soulful, blue eyes. She felt small, tiny, naked. She didn't know what to do at all. What to say. Not now, no, not yet, no, 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 no. She wasn't ready, didn't know what to do. This wasn't one of the dreams, where she could confront him without fear. Here, in the real world, Alma felt more vulnerable than she'd ever been. 1,000 different emotions clamored at her little breast, preventing her from doing anything other than fidgeting restlessly in place. So, instead, she stood very still and did not move, did not blink, did not even breathe, hoping beyond hope the boy would go back to sleep and forget about her. He did not. A sleepy smile pulled at his whiskered cheeks. "You're real," he muttered to himself, looking at her through half-lidded eyes. "You're really real." Alma felt her face begin to burn uncomfortably and prayed to all the gods and goddesses of the world that the blasted boy would go back to sleep. And he did. Right, she reminded herself, trying in vain to settle the mixed cauldron of her emotions. She'd escaped from father. Slaughtered those who had so cruelly hurt her, or at the very least, wounded them so badly that they would think twice, perhaps even hesitate before pursuing her further. They would not find her here. And if they did, she would make them pay. Thus emboldened, she crept back towards the boy's bedside to resume her silent vigil. It wasn't long before she grew tired of this, and longed to do something else. Still she watched and she waited with all the impatience of a child who does not understand their own strength, someone who doesn't understand the responsibility that comes with incredible power. She didn't want to be the one to watch, the one to wait, the one to stand aside, speaking to him only in his dreams. Something drew to this boy, this blonde child who radiated such warmth, such kindness, despite being alone. He knew pain as she knew pain, had suffered as he'd suffered. She wanted to play with him. This boy who was like her. But more than anything else, she wanted a friend. And she was determined that she would have a friend, and more, make it well within her power. The power to bring a universe crashing down, and she was wasting it keeping herself at arm's length. In that instant, loneliness overcame her own caution. Wordlessly, she stepped forward, peeled back the sheets and covers of the bed, then crawled in with Naruto. Cuddling against him, she was at once captivated by his warmth, that, and the fact that he didn't so much as stir when she nestled against him for comfort. It was at once captivating and enrapturing, this sensation. This silence. It was hers. Hers. So was he. She was determined never to let this boy out of her sight. Focusech knew, to key him to herself, at any cost. Which left young Alma at a bit of crossroads. After 2 weeks, she had found her way here to the boy that had first drawn F.E.A.R into this world. The silver-haired one back in the lab had proven pliable. The glasses man had told her where to go, and in turn, she spared his life. A place for her here? She hadn't thought about it. Until now. Now that she felt safe and warm and secure, she wanted to hold on to this feeling. Never let it go. Snuggling closer, she dared to wrap both her arms around him, willed her eyes to close. To sleep. A contented sigh forced itself between her lips. For the first time in a very long time, Alma Wade slept soundly. Sartobi Hiruzen was understandably flummoxed when Naruto was brought before him by an umbu the next morning. With a guest. And who is this? This is Alma. Tebeo. Naruto beamed happily, clutching her hand tightly. She's my friend. Ah, the sandame steepled his fingers, frowning. I see. One look at her told him that this was no mere child. Those eerie, haunted eyes and pale skin bespoke of a life beyond meaning. Even from here he could feel the air roiling around her, those fierce orbs locked onto him like a heat-seeking jutsu, ready to obliterate him at the slightest provocation. Naruto, for the most part, seemed quite happy with his new friend, and offered no explanation as to who she was or how she had found her way to him within the village walls. Even more confusing was the fact that no one knew or recognized this child, this girl who called herself Alma. Not a soul. Might she be a spy of some sort? The way she looked at him with those dead eyes, her shoulders tense as they discussed the possibility of interrogating her, which, of course, meant separation from Naruto. Master ninja that he was, Hiruzen did not fail to notice the slight twitch. Was she here to sway Naruto into enemy hands, then? Did he have a handler somewhere within the village? She was quite young to be sure, but Kumo had been known to try such trickery before. In good faith, he couldn't bring himself to dismiss the possibility, paranoia or no. He would have to separate these two, somehow. Whatever the cost. But for now, he would wait. What's your favorite memory? The question came from nowhere in the schoolyard, catching her flat-foot. My favorite memory, Alma said, her voice surprisingly flat despite her smile, would be one of the days when I wasn't tortured, stabbed, poked, and picked apart to increase my power. The sheer venom in her voice momentarily took him aback. A raucous burst of laughter behind them. The other children had overheard her. They didn't believe her. Alma had the grace to blush, but held her ground. Then the pink one spoke. Shut up. Come on, Sakura-kun. Alma scowled, her eyes narrowing as Naruto peeled off from her to plead with Sakura. She didn't like the pink one. No, perhaps that wasn't strong enough. She hated the pink one. The pink one was rude to Naruto, always pushing the smaller boy around, always ignoring him. And yet, he focused on her. He pleaded for her attention, begged for her affections, when he belonged to her. Would she take him away? A seed of anger, then fear began to grow in Alma's heart, twisted and knotted like a gnarled root. Naruto belonged to her. He was her friend. And any who dared to hurt him would pay the price. Eyes narrow, she focused her will on the green-eyed girl, bringing all that not-so-insubstantial wrath to bear upon her in a tidal wave of force. Alma didn't want her to suffer long. That would hurt Naruto. So it would be just enough. Light, a subtle nudge here, a push there. With a single thought, Haruno Sakura began to bleed. It started slowly at first. She didn't even seem to be aware of the bloody trickle trickling down her nose. At said courtyard, out of earshot, Sakura was beginning to twitch. Alma watched dispassionately, uncaring for her pain. Watched while she spasmed, and rolled her eyes to heaven in untold agony. The children cried out yet again, this time in fear and terror, but she ignored them. Sakura's body pounded upon the floor, thumping it like an angry drum. Alma was laughing now quietly infectiously, a small smile wreathing her face. Naruto granted her a reluctant smile at first, and then choked when he saw what she was doing. What was happening? What are you stop? Alma's face was the picture of innocence. Stop what? Before he could protest further, Sakura was gone, her brain and lungs hemorrhaging, body going still in the streets. In the ensuing panic, parents rushed in, some shouting curses, others scooping up their children and all but spiriting them away from the sudden and unexplained spectacle. One of them, the Pinkette's mother, shouted at Naruto, blaming him for the spectacle. Alma's brow darkened. Naruto watched her in interest. She was all but quivering in rage. An angry hiss pierced the air. The woman's head exploded like a ripe grape. If there had been panic before, now there was chaos. Bodies swarmed away from them as though they had the plague, children and parents alike scampering away from what they mistakenly perceived to be some sort of enemy attack. No one knew that the culprit was still standing there, the picture of naivete, silently delighting in the carnage she had wrought. Naruto couldn't find his voice. Was it really Alma who had done this? He didn't want to believe it, but after what he'd just seen. She looked at him for a long moment, considering. Then she smiled. Don't worry. I'll never hurt you, Naruto. Her smile was so soul-shatteringly sweet, so searingly innocent, felt the brick wall of his resistance crumble into dust. What came next caused those ashes to tremble, just a little. After all, I know you'd never hurt me. The boy gulped. Nope, never. He hoped that this words would put paid to Alma's suspicions. It was too much to hope that it would stop her from plotting. Of course I love you, Toho. You're my best friend and you love me too? Don't you want to stay together, like this? Forever? My black rose. The second time Sarutobi Hiruzen met Alma Wade, it was under less than pleasant circumstances. A migraine was already building at the back of his brain as he contemplated her, pounding at his temples like the drums of a great hunt, one out for his blood. Blood. The irony of his thoughts drew a small, rueful sigh from his lips. Why was it ironic, you ask? A question one of the many easily answered. Contrary to their first meeting, the children were quite sober, unsmiling, refusing to speak so much as a word. But that wasn't the worst of it all, not by far. Because Alma Wade was covered in blood. So was Naruto by proxy, but from the vacant, distant look in the boy's eyes made him wonder if he'd become detached from it, somehow. Not so for little Alma. Gore dripped from her feet, her hands, her dress. There was even a touch of it spattering her cheek. She didn't seem to notice the mess she was making in his office. Not a bit. Cammy, he couldn't even try to look at her, such was the racket within his skull. As if her very aura, her presence, only made things worse. Within good reason. If she was even aware of the consternation she was causing, she certainly didn't seem to care, because her hand was clenched tightly within Naruto's, as though she were afraid he would bolt the moment she let go. He was inclined to let her have her way for now, having read the report. Damning didn't even begin to describe it. 3 deaths, murders, 3 all committed by this little girl without so much as batting an eyelash. Apparently the Umbu were grizzled men and women who'd seen hell countless times over, were too afraid to clean her up after what she'd done to them. Seemed someone was foolish enough to attempt to separate the 2 children after the incident. Perhaps in an attempt to interrogate them, or, at the very least, get them away from the angry mob. And by eyewitness accounts, Alma had torn him inside out. His squad insisted that the little girl just looked at him, whispered something, and then his innards were spattered all over the street. No child should know such an ability, and yet she clearly did. It was madness, pure and sheer madness. There could be no other word for it. So now, when the 2 children were brought before him only hours after their first meeting, it was without the customary guards. But how to begin? Alma was watching him like a hawk would a mouse, waiting for that first fatal misstep that would signal dinner. That strange, eerie miasma he'd sensed from before was back en masse. It felt ready to pounce upon him if he uttered a wrong word. Despite the supposedly significant gap between their age and skill levels, he could not help but shiver under the girl's silent stare. Just who was this child? Steeling himself regardless of the fact, the old Kage drew in a deep breath and started to speak. So, he began tersely, I understand there was an incident this morning. Several, in fact. Neither of the children spoke to him. 3 people are dead, his voice plowed on, and everyone is demanding answers. I take it you have them? He ached to ask such questions of a pair of children, but to let this matter fade into obscurity was no longer a possibility, not after what Alma had done to the Umbu. There were already whispers, rumors, that she was the QB given human form, luridly false, of course, yet if they spread, no. Best to quell it now before there were still more deaths, or worse. To ignore it would be tantamount to disaster. If Naruto wouldn't admit it, then. Alma? You look like you have something to say. The ebon-haired lass frowned, her amber eyes sweeping back towards Naruto for another look. As though she were actually waiting for his permission. But that didn't make any sense. Something dawned inside of him, a thought he hadn't considered before. She only seemed to kill in self-defense of herself. Herself and her. Each time the victim had either said something harsh to them, or, in the Umbu's case, tried to separate them. Was it really so simple? Was Alma really killing simply to keep the boy safe? If that were the case. Alma, he pressed, waiting for her answers. Out of the corner of his eye, he saw Naruto's hand twitch, giving her palm a gentle squeeze. Whatever it was enough to spur the girl to speak. The pink one hurt him, was the reply, that flat tone barely shifting. So did the mother. Always hurting him, always making him feel small, worthless, useless. And the Umbu? Always hurting him, she repeated crossly. Always. A flicker of emotion flashing across her pale visage, the air growing dark around her. Supposed to guard him. Doesn't. Hurts, her voice seemed to lose coherency as she spoke, the darkness shifting, her face turning ghastly. No hurting, never again, never, Something in her voice gave him pause, just then as did the levitating desk before him. Wait, everything in the room, it shouldn't be possible, but it was. Steeling himself anew, he struggled to rein her in. Nevertheless, that did not give you the right to take their lives. Nay, old man, can't you let it go? Naruto asked, sounding sad and sullen. Alma was just trying to. Naruto, this is unacceptable, Sarutobi sputtered, feeling the situation slipping through his fingers like red, watery death. Whether you admit it or not, she killed without provocation, and I cannot help but think that you were the cause of it. 3 murders does not a shinobi make. I have half a mind to throw this friend of yours in a cell for questioning. Oh. Naruto stiffened, a spark of life returning to his eyes, followed by panic? Hiruzen frowned, struggling to grasp this. Why would he be afraid? His eyes cut back to Alma. What he saw there cemented his suspicions that Shu was not, in fact, a normal girl. Alma frowned, her brow furrowing, narrowing in what looked like genuine horror. The levitating objects shot upright, smashing into the ceiling with a dull crunch of noise and sending shards of broken wood and plaster fluttering down to the floor. She let go of Naruto's palm and took her head between her hands with a quiet cry, as though she'd been struck. Her head shook slowly from side to side, mouth moving wordlessly as began mumbling hoarsely to herself. Lights flickered in the mid-afternoon. The room itself began to shake, as though a giant hand had taken hold of it. Against his better judgment, he decided to put an end to it. Guards, he shouted. The moment the Umbu entered the room, the situation exploded. Violently. Nu. Oi, Alma, it's okay, calm down, Naruto called as he edged backward, regarding her as though she were a snake about to pounce. Perhaps she was. Ow, he cried out as an end table flew up and struck him the face, sending the poor boy sprawling. Still Sarutobi stared, transfixed by the girl's mighty breakdown. Her voice was rising now, a small, threaded cry laced with panic, a warbling note of pure pain. No, I don't want to leave Naruto, don't want to hurt him, but Butte's going to take me away again, lock me up just like Daddy. I hate Daddy, hate him so much. Sir? One of the Umbu asked, glancing. What should we do? Sarutobi sighed. It pained him to do this, but the girl was clearly not well. If she influenced Naruto's, this was for the best. Take her away. Alma's shriek was one of pure fear, raw, edged terror, brimming with malice. I hate him. Across the room, one of the windows shattered. The old Kage glanced at it. Alma appeared before him, which caused him fall backwards in fright, tumbling from his chair. The Umbu he'd summoned lay in a bloody pool at his feet, gasping out their last moments of life. Naruto was nowhere to be seen. When had she? Even as his mind struggled to accept this, as he scrambled upright, she was moving. But instead of attacking, she simply skipped happily around him in a circle, red dress fluttering. She asked him, quite nicely, "Do you like to play games, mister?" Games? That elicited a frown. Now is not the time for He never finished that sentence. A tendril of darkness shot upward from seemingly nowhere, stabbing him point blank in the head. Right bet when the eyes. Brain matter sprayed out of the exit wound as his corpse fell backwards onto ground with a wet, gurgling sound. Alma stopped and sighed with a shake of the head, bleak tresses swaying to and fro from the motion. She stared down at him with mock sadness, that pity evaporating like so much steam as he looked on, morphing into a cruel scowl. If you try to take me away from him again, I'll play with you for real. Hiruzen blinked. As though he'd just risen from a waking dream, the old man shook his head, struggling to understand what had just happened. Nothing. Nothing at all. The Umbu were still standing there, Naruto was still on the floor, and Alma was still staring bloody red daggers at him, but now the ghost of a smile wreathed her pale face. Slowly, painstakingly, she turned toward Naruto, helping him back up. Apologies were murmured, forgiveness granted. Yet her eyes never left his. Watching, staring, glaring. Do you want to play? Something broke inside of the Sandaime Hokage then, his headache intensifying as he stared into those deep, soulless eyes. Claws at his throat, maggots in his mouth. No more words were uttered between the two of them, Still, in that moment, he realized this little girl held his life in her hands and would cast it aside in an instant if she saw fit. He wanted to tell the guards to take her in, to lock this strange creature away where she could do him no harm. He'd seen all manner of horrors on the battlefield and in Orochimaru before his betrayal, but this made them look like pale ghost by comparison, a series of shades when faced with this dark terror standing before him. He couldn't do it. Everything inside of him quailed at the vision. His own demise laid out before him in excruciating detail. "I've changed my mind." Bitingly, he told the Umbu to stand down, dismissing the disbelieving men, much to the latter's disbelief. Naruto seemed to be of the same accord. "You were letting us go, Gigi?" With all his effort, Sarutobi forced a smile. "Yes, we'll see that it doesn't happen again. You're excused from class for the week until this incident is handled." His fingers steepled, mind whirring as he sought out a way to save face. He couldn't simply reverse a declaration like the one he'd just made, not without some precedent. Anything else would make him look weak, and now, in this tenuous time, still so soon after the war, that was the last thing he could afford. If only he could find a way. "Might I make a suggestion, Hiruzen?" At that very moment, the door decided to open from outside. An old, bandanged figure hobbled in, leaning heavily upon a cane. Alone, I regarded him keenly, like a hawk waiting to swoop down on unsuspecting prey at just the right moment. That's right. This man was a hawk. Always listening, always spying, always eager to take advantage of an opportunity. Sarutobi felt his lips purse into a thin line at that thought, reflecting that same, smug expression his old rival wore. "Danzu," he frowned at the man, struggling to be civil. "I don't recall summoning you." "I heard a commotion and came to investigate," came the glib reply. Then he saw Alma, and that old scarred, wrinkled face crinkled into a smile. "Ah, so this must the girl who caused such a fuss earlier this morning." A small frown marred Alma's face. Hiruzen noted with some satisfaction that she was eyeing him just as sharply as she had him. Perhaps even more so. Still a fuss? 3 lives lost was not a fuss. He was about to say as much when his former teammate cut in. "Although, if we need to make a decision, I might well have a use for her." Withdrawing a hand from his sleeve, he revealed a rolled piece of parchment. A scroll. "I thought something like this might happen in the future someday, although I hadn't accounted for our little friend here. I'm sure you'll find it most satisfactory. We can include the girl as well." Sarutobi gave it a glance, feeling his insides go cold. Was he seriously considering this? Truly? Alma was terrifying enough, confined to the village. If she was let loose on their enemies, that way lay paranoia and fear. If she was at least serving the village in some capacity, something to chain her to Naruto, to keep her from running rampant. If that could be accomplished, could not more lives be saved than those that would be lost? It was for the best in any case. Any prospect of Naruto leading even a remotely normal life had been vanquished the moment Alma came into his life. Honestly, he just felt sorry for him now. Laid out before him, on his desk, was an application for Naruto to become an Umbu. On paper it made virtually no sense. He was only 8 years old. He had virtually no skills to speak of, or did he? And the true terror in the room was Alma. She, likely as not, would only listen to him. No one else. Perhaps that was why Danzu was so desperate to include her in this. He'd heard the commotion and now, seeing it firsthand, realized the attempt to separate Alma from him would only end in disaster. Of course Naruto would still attend classes, and then there was the matter of the curriculum, the personal instruction he'd be receiving. Very well, he decided at last, the words tasting like poisonish in his mouth. "I'll see to it that he gets the training. Naruto-kun? Hi. You should thank Danzu-san. He's just ensured you a promising career as a shinobi." "Really?" Naruto gushed. "That's awesome. Tebeo, poor boy. He had no idea the depth of the agreement. I'm glad we could come to an agreement." No sooner had he gotten what he wanted than Danzo disappeared, trudging back the whence he came. Sarutobi fought off the sudden urge to spit at the man's back. He was doing what he felt was best for Konoha, after all. Even so. Right, I'll talk to you soon, Naruto-kun," It was all he could do to shoo them out the door, though not look at Alma and lock it before his stomach gave out. His breakfast emerged in a lurid gray puddle on the floor, the entirety of his body convulsing for a brief, painful eternity until he regained control of himself once more. The next few minutes that followed as he diligently cleaned himself and tidied the room were quite possibly the most unpleasant and humbling of his life. Alma Wade, huh? By the gods. What was she? Don't be afraid. Naruto started slightly as Alma's voice ghosted into his ear, the sudden sound nearly causing him to jump outright. They'd walked quietly from the Hokage's office through the streets and then the market, neither willing to speak as their feet carried them deeper and deeper into the village. The occasional glance had been stolen but nothing spoken. Until now, as they stood in the shade of the training grounds, beneath the autumn hearth of a fading tree, the leaves falling quietly in the breeze. I don't want you to be afraid, she pleaded, gazing mournfully up at him within the shadows as she held tight to his hand. Please, her eyes glimmered wetly, brimming with unshed tears. Didn't mean to hurt you. Her hand rose tentatively to stroke his bruised chin, her words falling apart even as she hastened to explain. Don't want you to hate. Please forgive. Please. Naruto felt his heart lurch inside his ribs, his resolve crumbling like a wet paper bag before those pleading eyes. In that instant, Alma Wade wasn't a terrifying goddess of death doom or even pure destruction. She was just a little girl, desperately wanting a friend. I'm not afraid, he muttered, looking away. It's just eerie kinda weird, Almaton. Her little lips puckered in a petulant pout. I'm not. Naruto snickered. Are two. Why, he griped. Because I like you. Yeah, well maybe I like you too, Databeo. With that, Uzumaki Naruto felt the last brick in the wall of his resistance crumble. Almost before he knew what was happening, he'd grabbed her and given her a hug. Alma's startled gasp confirmed his suspicions. This was no act, just a genuine plea for affection. When she returned the embrace, the boy felt his ribs creak. Oh, ribs, Alma, you're breaking my rib. True enough, she jerked back, smiling happily. You like me, it was a whisper, naked and soft. Then her smile became a great grin and she burst out laughing, the bell-like peals of her delight swelling in his ears to fill up the empty training grounds. You like me, she broke away from him and did a little dance, skipping about. Naruto colored, averting his eyes. Yeah, well, you made me say it, Baka. Naruto, the look she gave him was one of pure and utter besotment. He should have realized it in that instant, but young as he was, he didn't understand the ramifications. Alma Wade was truly and utterly smitten with him. Any possibility of her leaving his side, however briefly, had been dashed to nothingness on the sharp stones of his words. It was as if there were two sides to her. One, an insane, murderous child who'd kill someone the moment they spoke ill of her or him, and the other, a little girl who very, very, very much wanted his attention and all the affection he had to give, no matter the cost. One coin, two sides. Light and dark. Opposites. Or were they both her? Gah, all this thinking gave him a headache. The boy shook himself mightily, struggling to make sense of it all. As such, he was completely unprepared when Alma spun back to him and touched a hand to his face. Here, she said. I want to give you something. Pain sank its fangs into him. Naruto bent double with a hiss, crying out as a lance of agony stabbed into his brain. Then his eyes. His face. His every cell felt as though it were afire, scintillating sparks of white-hot agony shooting up and down across his spine into his bones, his muscles, and his very soul. All the world burned a terrifying shade of red, his body threatening to tear itself apart. Throughout it all, Alma was there with him, her hand never once leaving his, even as strange sights and sounds visions attacked him from all sides, bombarding him with words he didn't understand. And then it was over. On his hands and knees, drenched in sweat, gasping for breath, Naruto somehow managed to move. Raise his gaze. Every muscle in his body threatened to clamp down and render him paralyzed, but he stubbornly beat it back until he could look at her. He saw himself reflected in her eyes, his blue orbs burning eerily bright, as though lit from within. She was smiling. What did you do? He gasped. Alma crouched down, tilted her head and smiled softly. Sadly, I made you like me. Stronger. He caught sight of himself in a nearby puddle, and his eyes bulged. His eyes. They were like hers. Eerie. Not quite orange, but neither were they yellow either. Amber. The color of molten honey. Beyond that, he was relatively unchanged in the outside. But within was different. Inside, he could still hear the fox, but its cries were muted now, as though someone had muzzled it. That thought made him smile. But then he felt the anxiety again, the nervousness of not knowing what had been done to him. Does that mean? Naruto tried to ask. The words ended in a wet cough as he clambered to his feet. She took his hand, squeezed, and flashed away. When he saw her again, she was clutching something in her hand, a tiny thing, something he couldn't see. Watch, she said. Focus. Then she threw the rock at him. And time itself seemed to slow. Where once the pebble had shot forward at blinding speed, it now seemed to be crawling through tar, scooting forward in mere increments, a centimeter at a time. He stood there for a long moment, marveling at it. His hand reached out, poked it, and he saw it shift, moving to the right harmlessly past him. Blink. Time moved again. So too did another pebble. Naruto's arms snapped up almost without thought, caught the rock, and flung it back at her without thinking. Alma laughed at him, then raised a hand, a soft telekinetic shove sending it shooting back at him, faster than before. He yelped and made to swat it back away, but his hand crushed around it instead, reducing the small stone to powder in his hand. When he looked up, a hail of those very same stones were headed his way. One by one he grabbed them, crushed them, evaded them, his body moving on pure, perfect reflex. Instinct. Reflexes. When the strange sensate finally faded, he was left feeling oddly refreshed, as though he'd just woken from a long nap. Alma was beaming at him, clearly pleased. Naruto felt a slow, satisfied smile dawn. Oh. What else can you do? Alma grinned, and for anyone else, that smile would have meant death. All sorts of things. Do you want to play? Ruthlessly suppressing a tingle of dread, he smiled and said, Sure. Her smile was purer than sunshine. Yay. She's ruining you. Tainting you. So, don't let her. Stop this, right now. His rational mind offered one last feeble protest before he pushed it aside. He didn't care. Every moment spent near her corrupted him, stripping away his naivete, scooping out his innocence and filling him with something else. He needed to be near her. Her presence was like a drug, heady, warm and intoxicating. Already the shock of Sakura's death had all but begun to fade, replaced by icy, numbing calm. A small part of him gibbered madly at the insanity of it all, of what he'd seen, what she had done, but the other, larger part of his soul, that secret, defiled darkness deep inside that he seldom indulged, marveled at her. And yet, he wasn't afraid of her. He should bet definitely, but whenever he tried to think about it logically, he kept seeing her teary face, her hand desperately clutching against his. Her crying. She was ruining him, tainting him with every second spent together, and some part of him knew this. He couldn't bring himself to leave her. Naruto, hurry. Alright, I'm coming. She looked at him for a moment and then winked before dissolving into a cloud of ash as her giggling filled his mind briefly. He continued onward, following her deeper into the training grounds. Let's play. And the years flowed like wind. They received their very first mission nearly a week before graduation. The task, Danzu assured them, was simple. Eradicate a group of Kumogakure spies lurking on the border. Simple enough, right? Wrong. He'd neglected to mention their numbers, their skills, nor the fact that this was no spy ring. Rather, they found themselves facing an elite task force with one purpose: to capture someone. Several someones. And they were prepared. Naruto didn't realize it until the first net caught him. In a blink of the eye, he was ripped from his perch overlooking the campsite by the net and sent sprawling at their feet. He was suddenly intensely grateful he'd abandoned his old orange gear, because they didn't recognize him. Not straight away, at least. He'd discarded the old garb in favor of dark pants, a blood-red shirt coupled with a flak jacket and hood. Though he had yet to be considered an actual shinobi, The obscuring clothes kept his identity concealed just enough to cause some confusion amongst his would-be tormentors. Well, a rough voice drawled, nudging. What do we have here? A stray or whatever else he might have said dissolved into an endless, animal bleat as something grabbed him from behind and tore him into pieces. Alma was suddenly there, her expression twisted into a demonic rictus of pure, unadulterated hate. She ripped him free from the barbed net with a thought. All right? Naruto felt a hot, embarrassed flush build at the back of his neck. Yeah, thanks. You're a lifesaver. Sadly, the moment didn't last. Shit, it is them. That little death god and his bitch. He thought he actually heard her hiss. You can't have him, he's mine. Capture them alive, if you can. Alma laughed. It was a soft, bell-like sound that sent Naruto's heart racing in all the wrong and right ways it shouldn't have. When she spun around, the gore-covered goddess was grinning Ertoir, pearly white teeth flashing in the forest gloom. Her dress seemed to spin as she moved, her hair trailing after in a Seiken curtain of black death. He almost wanted to tell them they had no chance, that they'd be better off surrendering, but to no avail. 2 teenagers against several squads of enemy shinobi shouldn't have been much of a contest. It wasn't. Alma laughed and they died. She swung a hand, a head went flying, the man's head clattering wetly to the floor alongside his headless corpse. When another tried to close with her, she leered and he burst into flame. 2 others turned and set upon each other, carving into one another with their blades. A 5th found himself turned inside out, his intestines spattering the streets with a sickening squelch. And Alma was still laughing. The haunting sound of those tingling tones only terrified the enemy even more. She wasn't the same little girl who would rather flee than fight. She was 14 years old, a terror in her own right, and she took orders from no one. Naruto wasn't idle either. He weaved amidst them with ease, delivering savage cuts to unprotected flank, hamstringing others. Alma delighted in it. Isn't this fun, Naruto? She called, skirting past him just long enough to lay a bloody kiss on his cheek. Before he could react, she was gone again, a telekinetic shove mapling another Kumo-nin upon his own blade. He gurgled wetly, just before the katana bifurcated him, sending the tapered halves flopping wetly to the campground. Laughing, she turned an eye on the last Kumo shinobi, and still smiling, still laughing, waved her hand. Then her eyes grew large. A warning started on her lips. Goodbye. The words didn't come from her, but from behind Naruto himself. He felt a blade bite into his back, the hilt smashing into his cheek, and then the rage came. His rage. Alma's rage. Roaring in furies and pain, he riposted sharply, parrying the next strike and impaling the man on his arm in the next instant. His own strength surprised him. His blow went clean through, eviscerating the man's spine, the column of bow protruding wetly from his back. He hung there for a moment, paralyzed, gurgling wetly. Naruto scowled, his hand slowly forming a fist, uncaring as the slaughter continued around them. A thought hoisted the man up, gripped him from within as tightly as he could, and then pulling, twisting. Get off! Blew him into little bloody pieces. The shriek that followed belonged to 2, the man he'd killed. And a very, very, very angry teenager. He risked a glance behind him and saw an enraged Alma stalking towards the last of the Kumo kidnappers, now fixated solely upon the angry goddess. He'd never seen her so angry before. Her normally emotionless expression was replaced by a contorted demonic scowl. It was frightening to see her like that, to say the least. Crack, a sharp crunch of a nearby tree demanded his attention. He turned back just in time to see that she had lifted the massive oak, roots and all, free from the ground. Still, the words continued. You hurt him, hurt Naruto. As if it weighed nothing, it flew backwards, somersaulted, and smashed 3 men flat, rendering them little more than gory smears on the ground. She walked past him towards the overturned oak. As she did, the negative energy radiating off her made him feel incredibly cold. Hate you, kill you, I will. As she came to a stop before the overturned tree, the survivors dared to cast Raitun Jutsu at her. Alma batted the bolts aside without so much as a second glance and grabbed them with a jerk of her head. He swore he heard her snarl at them as they levitated into the air. Their pleas fell on deaf ears. She threw them into the campfire, burned them, scorched them, raised them into the air again. Kill you all? The forest was suddenly filled with the sounds of snapping bones and squishing flesh as she used her mind to toss them about the savaged campsite like ragdolls. They stopped screaming after the third impact on one of the trees. She just kept hurling them into the ground, the trees, and anything that she thought would tear them apart. When they were nothing more but greasy stains on the ground, she kept walking, straight into the center of what had once been the enemy camp. Chunks of earth and soil, the bodies of the slain shinobi, and anything loose started circling her. With increasing velocity. Finally, just as he could no longer see her behind the circling debris, she screamed. The sound was so loud that he momentarily lost his hearing. The debris flew straight up into the air and disappeared into the night sky. The sky itself seemed to rip apart as huge red gashes opened up. Blood-red clouds emerged from the gashes, and just as he thought he'd regained some semblance of hearing, Alma shrieked another deafening scream of rage. This time, a massive pulse of psychic energy overtook the campsite in the form of a red-tinted shockwave. It overtook him in an instant. And then there was nothing more than blood. Visions assailed him, an unintentional psychic assault of pure pain and grief, rising, swelling, beating at his brain until, with a gasp, Naruto collapsed onto his back. He stared into the hellish clouds as the blood rained down on his motionless form, a gross perversion of rains. There was nothing left of the camp, nothing of the forest, not even a trace of life beyond him, human, animal, or otherwise. She had destroyed it all. Everyone. Everywhere. Everything. Naruto, Alma appeared beside him and knelt down. She reached out and gently touched the sides of his bloodied and bruised face. Ouch! Naruto winced in pain and she retracted. Blood covered her from head to toe, rolling off her and onto his face as if she was crying. He realized with a small pang of cold shock that she actually was crying as she studied his beaten body. Trembling hands ghosted over him in a panic, unsure of what to do, what to tend first. She finally choked out, "I'm sorry. All my fault. Please, don't hate me. Two can fix you. Just let me." He coughed, his voice finally returning. "Hey, it's all right. I'm fine." She reached down again, but this time, his body moved of its own accord. Gently, slowly, he reached up and pulled her down on top of him. Her thin, smooth legs straddled his waist, and she caught herself by placing her hands on a shattered tree on either side of his head, her expression tentative. Her nose was touching his, brushing now, their lips were only inches apart. Naruto shifted, suddenly aware of his monumental blunder. She had gone very still. It felt as though he were holding a statue. She didn't tell him that she'd drawn him into her own world, that they were safe here for the time being, because the words wouldn't come. Her throat felt intensely dry and she gulped, sensitive to the slightest touch. As they stared into each other's eyes in intimate proximity, their racing thoughts flowed back and forth through their bond. They all arrived at the same idea. The same, inevitable conclusion. 6 years close to a decade really flashed before them in an instant. And then Alma moved. So, that was his very first thought as her mouth covered his. Alma was soft. Dimly he was aware of his hands trailing through her bloody hair, drawing her closer. Her arms encircled his neck in an iron band, scooting close to high, then closer still. It was there, as a bloody sea rained down onto them and absolutely drenched their bodies, that they first truly kissed each other. It was not out of lust or curiosity or even the event that they had just survived. It was a mutual showing of affection that filled them both with warmth. It was their first kiss. And it was the beginning of the end for an entire universe. I am death. I am darkness. And no one will take my light. Alma Wade. Harlan Wade was positively giddy. So now, the preparations were nearly complete. Years of careful experimentation, and he was confident he'd found a way to tear open the portal again. Some called him crazy, others mad. But were not all the great minds of this century called madmen before they proved themselves? And he would prove himself. Splicing himself with Alma's DNA had been a risky venture. He still saw things sometimes, but the power, oh, the sweet, glorious power that came with it, he felt like a god. And like a god, he would rule. He glanced back at the replica soldiers, mindless grunts, mere empty shells who would obey his every command. Part of him longed to act now, to take command and no. Not yet. The time was not ripe. But soon it would be. So, not even Alma would be able to stop him. Achoo. Alma sneezed softly, blinking in the dark as she scrubbed at her nose. Odd, very odd. Someone must be talking about her. Frowning, she settled back into her seat in the black, resolved to wait for her victim. He would come to her soon enough eventually. Once, she would have lost her temper and simply sought out her target. She would have found him, ripped him limb from limb and been done with it. Once, she would have let that impatience stop her. But now almost nothing could stop Alma Wade. When she wanted something, she took it. When she needed someone dead, she killed them. When she required someone to help her achieve her wicked little goals, she used whomever was available. It was simple as that. Be it through trickery or deceit, intimidation, or outright invading the dreams of others, she would go whatever lengths she deemed necessary. She would do anything to keep Naruto her light, her happiness, her sweet, precious everything in herself, of course safe from harm. In a sense, she owed this word a great deal. Not just for Naruto, but for all the clever, interesting things she'd learned here. Their first mission together had taught her well, helped her to learn more of what she already knew. She'd thought herself clever before she'd come to this eerie world with its strange ways. Now, she realized just how naive that little girl had been. As a child, she would have simply slaughtered anyone who came within 3 feet of her precious light. She would have marched right up to Danzo Shimura and killed him the moment she saw what he intended to do to her and Naruto. But she hadn't. Instead, she had waited, fasted, held herself back until this very moment. Until now. Until they'd returned from that mission. Until she was certain Naruto was ready. Now, as she waited patiently in the shadows and drank her tea and for the old hawk to come home, Alma reflected on the events that had led to this pivotal moment. Naruto didn't know about this. He couldn't know about it. He saw eye to eye with her more often than not, but he wouldn't condone blatant murder. Not yet. Because he couldn't see what she saw, didn't know the terrors Danzo was planning to visit upon them. But Alma did, and she wouldn't wait any longer for those twisted schemes to bear fruit. She had what she wanted, and all he had left to give them was pain. No more. Not on her watch. 6 years. So many days. Years of subtly poisoning the man's mind over time, haunting his dreams, his every waking moment, making him more and more paranoid. Slowly at first, causing him to see things that were not there, never herself, never anything that he might expect from her. Carefully, patiently. The taint had been insidious, creeping up on him with each passing year until now, forcing him to do her will. Forcing him to postpone their missions more and more, giving her the chance to train up Naruto, teach him to do what she could do, then some. Now he was almost fully prepared, and now, she no longer needed Danzo. In another life she would have killed him immediately and gained nothing. How foolish that would have been. You see, in the elemental nations, Alma Wade had learned the value of subtlety. She'd killed several who tried to take Naruto from her, but that just resulted in the boy being shunned, which made him unhappy. And Alma didn't want him to be unhappy. So after she'd crippled the annoying duck, but she'd decided to spare the shadow user and the chubby one, even the dog boy with his puppy, just to see what they would do. They were afraid of her at first, terrified. Really then they learned, so long as they didn't hurt him, they would live. And surprise, surprise, Naruto made friends. Even the puppy liked him. Alma rather liked puppies herself. So did Naruto. Maybe she should ask him for one? But there he was. She stiffened, stretching out her senses in anticipation as Danzo entered the room. A dark, predatory smile graced her pale lips. He had no idea she was there. Doubtless he was wary, had every right to be, but without knowing who rather than what had disarmed his traps, but without the physical aura of her presence to alert him to the danger, he had no way of preparing himself for what came next. Alma waited for him to close the door, standing by patiently as the paranoid shinobi locked and sealed it. Then she spoke. "Hello, Danzo." Credit where it was due, the old man moved quickly. Just not quickly enough. In the last 6 years, Alma had vised the dreams of every citizen of Konoha, ever shinobi. She'd learned skills that would have taken most the rest of their life to learn, and, while she couldn't replicate all of them, there were some that she'd taken to most handily. So when he tried to pull back the bandages on that eye of his, she put those skills to work and cut his legs out from under him. The warm carpet of his quarters greeted Danzo's face but for a moment, then someone grabbed him by what remained of his hair and tugged him upright. He found him face to face with the little terror. Alma's smile seemed benevolent, when it was really anything but. A hand shot out, digging into his face, probing at the bandages, pulling pain. Pain. Danzo screamed, a roaring, inhuman sound of pure, primal, agonizing fire as he felt small fingers wrap around the viscous membrane of his eye and begin to pull. Agony was suddenly everywhere, filling him, devouring him, consuming him. Something tore, and he felt renewed agony flare in his skull, half of his vision gone to black. Still more screaming. Peering through a bloodshot eye, he beheld his stolen Sharingan, clutched in Alma's hand. "Oh, I know what this is," she mused aloud, observing the bloody thing held in her palm with frightening interest. "You wanted to use this to control me, Naruto." "Not anymore." She squeezed, pulping it into a fine mass. Danzo gurgled wetly as she released him, flopping to the floor. A fine, bloody mist frothed at his lips. "That brat, I never should have let him live." Her golden eyes met his lone one, narrowing coldly. "Is that so?" Too late he realized his mistake. "Pain," Alma whispered with a hiss, the words soft like velvet sheets as her mind delved into his, sundering it like bloody cabbage. "Not good enough." "1,000 needles," she snarled. Another shriek. Impalement and another. "Struck by lightning." Danzo screamed again. This last one was a wet, keening, choking sound, and it made Alma warm in the strangest sort of places. Humming to herself, she reached down and, taking hold of his arm, began to pull with surprising strength. Danzo went pale. She wouldn't. He felt his back arch anew as another round of white-hot intensity descended upon him, crippling him still further, crushing his resistance. He tried to struggle upright. If only he could focus, if he could. But Alma wouldn't have that. And the arm goes break, arg. With a wet pop of sound, the limb came away at the shoulder, gray and discolored. A thought set the arm aflame, leaving it smoldering in the corner, setting the curtains alight. Thick, oily smoke began to spread across the room, cloying, choking. If Alma was at all aware of the fire she'd accidentally started, she didn't seem to care. Instead, she set to work on his remaining limbs with a patience born from years of waiting, ripping them free with almost contemptuous ease one by one. Blood spurted wildly amidst the severing, coating the room in her in gore. Alma giggled, utterly unnoticing of the blood spatter on her face. "Oh, I've waited so long for this," she was laughing, he realized, delighting in the blood and chaos and gore, the flames surrounding her. "Now Naruto will be free. No one will chain him down. He will be mine forever and ever and ever and..." Monster. By now the esteemed elder had dissolved into gibbering sobs, unable to do more than cry and choke as the oxygen slowly sucked itself from the room. Couldn't breath a cold. Alma circled him slowly, her golden eyes reflecting nothing but contempt as she regarded the slowly spreading pool of blood around him. There was a madness there in those golden orbs, he thought, that last bastion of sanity, recognizing that the girl was completely, utterly insane. She could not be controlled, would not be stopped. "I suppose I should thank you, though." A glazed eye cut towards her. "You were useful for a bit, I admit," she continued, smiling as she sashayed back and forth, to and fro. "You really were. You gave me the chance to make Naruto strong. To make him untouchable. But now you want to use him. Like the rest. Use me. And well, I just can't have that." Her hand waved again and the aging shinobi collapsed, still trapped in his own mind. He never saw her drape a burning curtains across him, never felt the flames creeping up across his back until it was too late. "Goodbye, Danzo," she intoned sweetly, sounding very much like a little girl. "I hate you." The last thing he saw were the eyes before she vanished. Those awful migraines. Sarutobi always seemed to have one nowadays, a constant thud-thud-thud always beating at the back of his brain whenever Alma Wade came to pay him a visit. He chalked up the fact that she'd simply appeared as yet another unexplained ability. By this point he was well beyond questioning what the girl could do. She came and went as she pleased, and to those who dared to get in her way. Well, he supposed the raging fire that had just consumed Danzo's residence was a testament to her work. Most unfortunate, but accidents were known to happen, and his old teammate was getting up there in age, so surely it wasn't more than a coincidence. More than a coincidence, indeed. You killed him, didn't you? He didn't look up from his desk. Alma nodded sagely, looking perversely pleased with herself as she stood before him. Yes, and I regret nothing. She swayed back and forth on bloody feet. He was going to use Naruto and I for his own ends. So, on the contrary, the wizened Kage held up a hand, interrupting. I congratulate you. In fact, I'd like to reward you and Naruto both. Here. He was keenly aware of those golden eyes on him throughout as he dipped a hand beneath his desk. She trusted no one outside of Naruto, after all. Doubtlessly she expected him to draw a kunai. Imagine her surprise then, when he emerged with a small box. And within said box, for the first time since he'd met her, a confused look flitted across her face. She looked down at the pair of headbands she'd been given, then at him, and back to the headbands again. I didn't understand. And she didn't, not in the slightest. The man was rewarding her? That didn't make sense. She'd had minimal contact with the man over the last 6 years, but each time she was certain he was scared senseless of her. So why then would he? Have you ever thought about joining a team, Alma? Her eyes narrowed. I only care about Naruto. Yes, I'm sure you do, he nodded, but haven't you given any thought to having friends? This village is your home, after all. Those words drew a soft hiss from her. She didn't like where this was going. I don't need friends. But you do want them, don't you? She faltered and looked away, suddenly uncertain. Naruto is all I need. True, Naruto was her all, her everything, but even she couldn't be with him every waking moment. A friend. Naruto was more than that to her, but the idea of a friend, someone who understood her in a different way, she'd never thought about it before. A seed was planted in her mind. How would I go about this team business? Were I interested? For all his trepidation, Sarutobi found himself physically shaking as he fought off laughter. Clearly the young teen was interested. He told her, as a matter of fact, I've already selected something for you and Naruto. You need only meet her in the training grounds tomorrow. Your sensei as well? And if we don't like it, her brow darkened thunderously. Then the two of you may go on as you always have. Very well. A silent swish of sound and she was gone. Hiruzen groaned, hiding his head in hand. Kami preserve me, what have I done? Only after he was certain she'd left did he truly allow himself to sag in defeat. He'd learned a valuable lesson in the last 6 years concerning Alma Wade. She couldn't be controlled. At most you could hope to aim her at something and let her destroy everything in that given direction. Opposing her was pointless, as Danzo had just demonstrated. So long as he remained on her good side, he should have nothing to fear, in theory at any rate. Still, the thought nagged at him. He couldn't play this game forever. Not without lethal consequences. Something had to be done. Surely there was a way to send her back from whence she had come. You seem pretty happy. Oh, am I? Alma preened prettily under the attention, flicking a moist strand of dark hair from her face as she walked beside her beloved through the market. Beside. Not forward or behind, but right next to him, Alma thought to herself, as equals. If Naruto had any suspicions as to why she was so secretly delighted, he didn't seem intent on sharing them. Perhaps he knew what she'd been up to. Perhaps not. I think you are, he replied. She hummed softly, resting her head against the shoulder of his scarlet jacket where his headband lay. Naruto grunted in surprise at the sudden contact but didn't protest, adjust his arm to hold her loosely. He hadn't protested either when she'd suddenly shown up with a pair of Hishiate in hand, insisting they were now officially recognized as shinobi. All in all, she was quite pleased with herself. A quick bath had cleaned her of the blemishes and blood from her grisly task, By the time Naruto had woken to find her, he was none the wiser. Her red dress, the only real article of clothing she had, was fresh and clean without so much as a drop of blood. Her own headband lay worn loosely around her neck, the black cloth warm against her skin as his arm brushed hers, his shoulders still draped around her like a protective blanket. Her boy sang happily. Her heart did a small flutter at the contact, memories of that bloody day coming back to her. Alma ducked her head, looking up at him through dark lashes. "Hey, kiss me." The poor boy nearly tripped over his own 2 feet and sent them both tumbling at the question. They stopped walking. She was suddenly, intensely aware of his hand in hers, their fingers twining together like a finely woven knot. A knot she used to tug him closer, away from the main road and into an alley. They were alone in the street, but a part of her felt self-conscious despite that, not wanting others to see this special, intimate moment. Her hands found his chest in the dark, pushing him against a wall, her fingertips questing. Naruto sputtered, looking down at her. "What's this all of a sudden?" A small, nervous smile tugged at the corner of her mouth. "Do you not want to kiss me again?" "I do." His flush deepened at the frankness of her statement as she stood on her tiptoes, kissing his chin. "Geez, you're so forward, Databeo." "But you like that, right?" she asked, purring as his hand moved to cup her cheek. She needed confirmation, craved his praise like a drug. Without him, she was nothing. Without him, she had no reason to be here. The words, then, when they came, were the most wonderful thing she'd ever heard. Always. That was all Alma needed to hear. She was so happy she accidentally sent a trash can sailing with her powers. Naruto balked. "Oh. Mine," she whispered softly herself, scooting forward. "You're definitely mine. No one else can have you." "Alma? What's with that glazed look in your eyes?" "Mine." Then she pounced. She all but floated into his arms, wrapping legs and arms around him and pressing her cool lips to his. The kiss was like drinking fine wine, and Alma lost herself in just as he did, closing her eyes as his body pressed on and against hers, his mouth devouring hers hungrily. Her tongue licked at his lower lip, begging for entry, and he yielded with a moan. Alma felt every fiber of her being come alive at that sound. This was what she craved, the feeling she'd been craving since that mission. She felt his hands hitch up beneath her dress, and then suddenly she was the one pressed against crumbling brick wall, holding her, cupping her, causing small tingles of delight to shoot up and down her spine. He held her tight, kissing, always kissing, and it felt so wonderful she could feel her thoughts blending with his, and it was perfect, blissful. Dear God, and ever want the stop. Yes. The cry tore from her in an involuntary gasp as she bucked against his leg, and she felt something wet sluice down her thigh. It didn't take long for her to realize what had happened. She'd enjoyed herself so much that she'd actually. Hurriedly, Naruto released her, fearing as though he might have hurt her. "Okay, what?" I think I'm satisfied for now," she decided, reveling in the baffled look her lover wore. "It was just so terrible." "Oi, wait a sec, what just happened? Did I hurt you or something?" Alma laughed and kept walking. "Oh, Naruto, you could never hurt me." Except when he did. In that at least, a small part of her was grateful that she couldn't influence him like the others, because it would have made things too easy. Naruto was Naruto because he was Naruto, and twisted as that logic might sound to others, it made a certain sort of sense to Alma. If she could make her light do whatever she wanted, whenever she wanted, then he wouldn't be any fun. She liked it and hated it in those rare occasions when he disagreed with her, when they fought over something. It made her love him all the more. He was her light, of course, but sometimes she rather liked it when he was dark too. She liked anything and everything about him. Because he wasn't a pawn, not like the others. He was her partner. The king to her queen. In the end, for all he'd done, Danzo was merely another of her tools of the trade. She'd cultivated many assets this way, many of whom didn't even know they were hers to begin with. Today, one of those assets had outlived its usefulness. It had become a threat, and so it had died. Simple as that. "Alma-chan?" "Oh, it's nothing." Alma put her arm around Naruto's again as she had so many times before, but this time he pulled it back out. Unwilling to be steered. Her smile was merry, A facade not to let him see just how much it hurt. Rejection was something she feared and loathed in equal measure, more than anything else. They walked down a short, broad street consisting of clothing shops and food stand, pleasing scents reaching them. Alma tapped her fingertips together with quiet interest, her eyes scanning the stands and shops as the two of them passed. Naruto felt a small smile pull at his lips. She felt his emotions through their shared bond, but even then his reply genuinely surprised her. "Wanna go in?" She spun on him, eyes shining. "Can we?" What followed could be described as both heaven and hell by a certain unfortunate blonde. In that day alone he learned that Alma had a most curious taste for clothes, and she loved showing off for him. The day ended with several bags worth of new clothes all but given to them by the terrified shopkeep, drifting behind their heads in a telekinetic hold. They didn't return home until the next morning. Alma peered intently at the girl that was to be her teammate and wasn't entirely certain she disliked what she saw. She'd been waiting for them at the grounds. One glance at her mind had told her much, but it was the sheer depth of information, the overwhelming amount, that immediately baffled her. Very odd indeed. "Umi's there something on my face, Alma-san?" The goddess gave the Hyuga a stern look, sending her back into stammering silence as they waited. Yes, very odd indeed. Alma found herself slightly shocked to find another like her and Naruto. She simply hadn't paid attention before. Until now. She was even more surprised how much this pale-eyed girl's lot echoed her own. A father that ruthlessly attempted to sculpt her into what he believed she should. Bruises and blood, inside and out as she was struck beneath her skin in an attempt to force her to comply. Even beneath that thick jacket, she could see them clear as day here in the training field. A sister who was abused. A sister that took all the pain. A sister received all the praise, while she was left in the dirt. True, the sisters cared for each other, but it would be a little too shocking if the similarity was exact. This girl watched them, she felt her eyes on Naruto, and also on herself. Felt the longing within them, to stand beside Naruto, to have the strength Alma so easily showed in the face of those that would hurt her. Alma mused on this, could she ever bring herself to shame Naruto, even with someone so like herself? What about when they grew older? She wanted something special with Naruto, could she let this relative newcomer in? She was nothing like the pink one from before. She was quieter for one. If she were to join them, Alma was confident she could rein her in from being too forward with Naruto. Although her thoughts drifted back to one of her psychic jaunts. She remembered following a silver-haired man, remembered him reading a peculiar orange book. That book had been responsible for stirring some of her feelings towards Naruto, but now that she thought about it, she remembered the scene on the page. A man and a woman, locked in an embrace that still brought a blush to her face. But there had been a second woman, hugging the man from behind, looking over his shoulder at the first woman with an intense gaze and a smile on her face. There was an interesting thought, that when she had her Naruto, she could also have a way to see what he made her feel, through the form of another. As her mind spun with possibilities and the blush rose to atomic levels, Alma released a giggle that she instantly realized echoed the silver-haired man's. "Oh my, Alma?" Blinking herself out her stupor, she glanced at Naruto and feigned a smile, secretly trying to imagine it. She liked the way his lips felt on hers. Perhaps like was too tame of a word. She'd loved it. She wanted to feel it again, to taste it, him, devour him, and she wasn't willing to share that with someone. Not yet. Perhaps not ever. A wave of jealousy crested over her. Teammate or not. She shook her head, suppressing it, suddenly feeling possessive. Naruto was hers. No one else could have him. No one. One final shaking pushed these thoughts from her head for the time being. Well, a new voice sounded, "Looks like the three of you are hero no." Her eyes snapped open so hard it could have been audible. She stood there for many tense, breathless seconds, until it became apparent that no one else was going to speak. Despite her best efforts, her lower lip gave a small twitch. That was all it took for the floodgates to burst once she laid eyes on the man who would be teaching the three of them. An involuntary, dismayed giggle forced itself through her lips. It was him, that very same person. "Ano Alma?" Naruto blinked. "Oi, Alma-chan?" What's so funny? Kakashi Hatake blanched when he saw the girl in her red dress. Oh, it's you. There was a silence. Fate, she thought, was truly a strange thing. And then Alma Wade laughed so hard she cried. Did I mention that I'm insane? Funny, I would have thought all the blood and corpses made that quite clear. So, you're Zabuza, right? Nice Tami-cha. Saya looked nervous. Is it the eyes? Alma-chan says they scare a lot of people. Uzumaki Naruto. Waves of madness. Kakashi-sensei lost the ensuing challenge quite handily, Hinata thought. After all, how could one win something one never started? The bell test, that is, the agonizing ordeal he had inflicted upon many prospective ninja time and time again, which he had intended to use against the 3 students under his care, lasted all of 3 seconds. No more, no less, and those were clearly 3 seconds he never wanted to experience again so long as he lived. He'd taken out the bells, started talking, seen Naruto and Alma's shared smile and promptly declared the 4 of them to be Team 7, much to her bafflement. She was still puzzling over the matter as she contemplated their target. Annihilator in position. Naruto's voice hummed pleasantly in her ear, crackling through the headset with a light rumble. As ever, her heart skipped just a few beats at the sound of it. Was it so wrong to want him? He'd always been so kind to her, Cammy, he was still kind to her, and the way he looked at her sometimes. Scarlet Goddess, came Alma's reply, ready to cut off all escape routes. And Hinata? I can hear you thinking of him, dear, the implied threat was clear. Alma was terribly possessive of what she deemed to be hers, and Naruto was emphatically hers. Unless something could be done to convince this stubborn goddess otherwise, that wasn't going to change anytime soon. Forget sharing, she was prone to imploding people who so much as looked sideways at her husband in the street. Oddly enough, she'd started calling him that after they became a team. Hinata? Kakashi's deadpan voice rang through her head. Are you in position? Hinata groaned, drawn from her reverie by the words of her sensei. Pale eyes, herding target into trap, puny book reader. Why had sensei let Alma choose the code names, again? He was terrified of her. Although she had to admit, puny book reader was a little funny, and there went the target. A dark, vile little monster darted through the grass, only to turn when Hinata lunged into her path. Fast it bounded past her with an almost mocking meow, its paws propelling it forward and back into the brush. She did not pursue, and why should she? A sharp and terrified yowl told her Naruto had closed on it, hurting the creature yet again. Another yelp Kakashi told her it had been redirected once more. It jumped over a log, clambered up a tree and found itself staring at a girl. Dark hair swayed in an unseen breeze, golden eyes dancing like the moon. She grinned. Got you? If it was possible for a cat to look smug, Tora would have been most smug indeed. As if a mere child could catch it, all it had to do was leap from one branch to the next and then it happened. You're not going anywhere, fuzzball. Stay. Alma purred, a terrible, heart-stopping sound that changed her countenance from that of a serene teenage girl to an outright terror. The cat's fur bristled, its back arched, tail standing erect. Good, the goddess preened. Evil little creature knew who to fear. Alma spread her pale arms wide, smiling as she approached. Here kitty, kitty, kitty. Tora hissed in fear. This girl, she stank of blood and death and dark, terrible things. Run, flee, escape, but it couldn't. It was rooted to the branch by some unknown force, paralyzed where it stood. There was no other word for it in the tiny creature's mind. She was terror-fear incarnate, and she would do awful things to her, she just knew it. In the end, the poor feline simply passed out, foaming at the mouth long before Alma could even reach it. Triumphant in her smirk, she picked it up and dropped out of the tree where the others had congregated. Pink bow on the ear. Target acquired. Naruto grinned, giving her a big hug. Thata girl, I knew you could do it. Alma beamed in his embrace, still proudly clutching her prize. Of course, husband. Was there ever any doubt? Well, I kinda thought you'd kill this one. Naruto, what? Can't a guy be honest? Hinata sighed softly. She hated feeling excluded from the dynamic. If only she had more confidence. And what are you sulking for? Khmer group hug no jutsu. Those sulking thoughts turned into a stuttering squeak as Naruto reached across and drew her into the very hug she'd been secretly wanting. Alma twitched, her bright eyes flashing in irritation at this, her entire body going rigid at this, even this minor form of sharing her beloved husband. Naruto sighed at the sharp mental jab and reluctantly withdrew. Anyone else would have been dismembered for upsetting her so. Alright, sheesh, can't blame a guy for being nice. Kakashi was suddenly struck by how frighteningly efficient the girl was on missions such as these. Oh, she despised painting fences, gardening, and other menial tasks, but when it came to hunting down something actual living, breathing beings, well, the kid was a veritable predator. Nothing could escape from her. She'd make a fine tracker if she could refrain from killing. That Tora was still alive was something of a miracle. What happened? He asked, noticing the foam in its mouth. Passed out, she beamed, shortening the sentence in her glee. Satisfied? Alma grinned, somehow managing to look quite regal as she did. We are. She spun and pressed a swift kiss to his cheek, eliciting a sputtering blush in the blonde. Now, let us collect our payment. Yes. That was another side of Alma. She was quite affectionate with those she cared for. Hinata swallowed nervously, feeling their eyes on her. I hope the client doesn't mind what you did. Alma's face was the picture of innocence. Kakashi shuddered. I'm sure she'll understand. And Hinata was left to wonder at his deference to her once more. Why did he fear Alma so, you ask? The answer was quite simple in retrospect. Know that look Hatake Kakashi did, and he knew it was nothing good. Most would have tried to bowl on ahead regardless of their fear, but Kakashi Hatake had a very personal experience as to what the depraved little goddess could do when she was provoked. After what he'd seen, he had no desire to bring that sort of wrath down on him again. The memory was still glaringly fresh, despite the passage of time. So many of his precious books in ashes. Just the memory of it made him shudder. He knew she could do far worse, so he'd promptly admitted defeat the moment he laid eye on Alma, the moment he'd made the connection that she was associated with Naruto and Hinata. That certainly explained the boy's rapid and unusual increase in skill over the years, coupled with his more unusual abilities. It also explained why the shy heiress seemed to be sticking to them so. He knew firsthand that Alma had a way of sucking you into her pace, whether you liked it or not. The instant he'd laid eye on the little red terror, he knew it was over for him. He was going to pass these three, no questions asked. For better or worse, he was stuck with them. After all, even he wasn't stupid enough to mess with a goddess. Hiruzen knew he would be giving Team 7 a cranked mission the moment Naruto passed Tora off to the daimyo's wife. And they hadn't even asked yet for one yet. Because Alma's face was dark as a thundercloud's, a sure sign she was either bored or angry. He prayed it was the former, that at least could be directed. Nothing would be able to stop her if she was truly angry. It would be like trying to stop a typhoon with your bare hands. No matter how strong you were, you couldn't stop it. All you could do was get the hell out of the way. Only Naruto could stop her rage, but he'd long since learned that the blonde was more likely to side with the little hellion rather than his own village. After all, he knew who had shown him more kindness in the last 6 years of his life. It was a bitter pill to swallow, but swallow it he did. He had no other choice. If only he'd tried harder to befriend the boy. If only, but no. Naruto's loyalty lay more and more with Alma with each passing year. His once bright dream of becoming Hokage now nothing more than a shadow by comparison. Send in Tazuna, he sighed. Tazuna? Naruto and Alma exchanged a baffled look. He's a bridge builder requesting an escort to his home country of Wave, Hiruzen clarified. A simple mission with little risk. He thought he saw Alma smile at the word risk, perchance. No, it surely must have been his imagination. And was Naruto smiling too? A man wearing a bamboo hat, a bottle of sake clutched in his fist and sporting an atrocious beer gut walked in almost moments later. I'm being protected by these two kids? He scoffed loudly, taking a harsh swig from said bottle. Hell, I wanted a ninja team, not a DOW. Naruto coughed as he hung from the ceiling, his short sword a mere millimeter from the bridge builder's throat. Alma preened proudly at her husband's swift movement. As ever, his inhuman reflexes served him well. She was the only one who had seen him move, and now the puny mortal was wetting his pants. "Would you kindly retract that statement, Tazuna-san?" Naruto hummed, pressing the blade even closer, drawing blood. "Or would you prefer this kid to cut your throat and save you the trouble?" Right, not a kid. Sorry. Naruto felt like he was on cloud 9 from the moment they cleared the village gates. Finally, he wanted to jump skip sing. Each and every fiber of his being all but sang to be out of the village, away from the judging, persecuting eyes of his people. Well, not his people. He had no reservations as to what they thought of him and his girlfriend, and frankly, he didn't give a damn. They were pigs, the lot of them, and pigs got slaughtered when they became annoying. Pigs like Tazuna. The man was leaking anxiety like a cracked sieve. He could practically see the dark miasma of terror bleeding from his. What was he hiding? Something to remember for later. "He's keeping a secret," Alma hummed in his ear, her body pressing closer to his as they walked. "Want me to find out what it is?" Tempting, but no. "The last time you went poking around someone's head, you killed Danzo," he reminded her. "We'd be in trouble if you killed the client." She hid her surprise well, he thought, her pale lips curling in the slightest of frowns. "How did you know?" "I know you," he answered simply, patting her head. "You're not the sort to let a threat like that stand. Did you think I wouldn't find it odd that we were suddenly fast-tracked onto this team?" She tried to nuzzle into his palm, but he wasn't having it. He knew she was trying to distract him. "I thought I told you to control yourself." Her mouth dipped into a pout, and he was struck with the sudden urge to kiss it away. "You never let me have any fun, husband." That was another thing. She'd started calling him that recently, and while he had no illusions that he would someday marry this dark goddess, the sudden use of the moniker baffled him. As did her behavior. "You're not having fun now?" The irritated goddess shook her head, the motion sending her ebon tresses swaying to and fro. "Not really, no." She grabbed his hand firmly, walking ahead. "I could think of better things." Her fingers twitched restlessly in his, itching for excitement. "I want to kill something." "You always want to kill something. But that's what makes it fun," she chirped. That drew yet another deadpan from the blonde, his bright eyes finally flicking to the smug goddess beside him. For once in her life, she wasn't wearing her red dress. Pity. He rather liked the red dress. It reminded him of all their little jaunts when they were younger. It was his favorite, after all. This particular outfit was rapidly becoming a close second. Tudai, as if realizing her casual dress might be a hindrance, selected a simple pair of tight, dark jeans and a dull red cami bless her sleeveless blouse, over which hung an equally sleeveless azure jacket like his eyes, exposing her pale arms and a tantalizing portion of that slender stomach. The bounce of her long ebon hair, the sinister, suggestive sway of her hips whilst she walked slightly ahead of him suggested she knew full well he was watching, and delighted in every moment of his torment. The sudden spike of desire startled even him. "My eyes are up here," she purred, eyes dancing. Sneaky little, she was doing this on purpose. "I'm so sorry, am I distracting you?" Naruto somehow stifled the growl in his throat. Distracting. Terribly distracting, horribly distracting. That's just not fair." Her smile was the most arrogant, adorable thing he'd ever seen in all of his existence. "All is fair in love and war, husband." Yes, that's right. This was love. And war. She was his. Which brought him back to his inevitably line of thought. If all went well, they'd be back in the village within a few months. Therein lay the problem. He was sure if he wanted to go back to the village, why couldn't they just leave him alone? He simply wanted to live a nice life with Alma. And maybe Hinata. She seemed like a decent enough sort. A good friend. His eyes swung back at her, posted in the rear guard. A small squeak greeted him once she realized he was watching, her fingers tenting nervously. There was again baffling. If only he could figure out why Alma became so blatantly hostile whenever she was near. He was no longer the same dim-witted boy he'd once been, but he still wondered at her behavior sometimes. "If you would stop thinking of that wench for a moment," Alma's mental voice intruded upon his thoughts. "I believe we have company." An impulse flicked his attention to the right. He glanced sidelong at the puddle as they passed it. Suspicious. It hadn't rained in weeks, and he could feel a host of negative emotions rising off of it like steam. Impossible to miss. He really needed to thank Alma for opening his eyes one of these days. These newfound gifts continued to amaze him. He didn't need the Byakugan to see what Hinata had just seen, didn't need his sensitive ears to hear her small, stifled gasp. He just knew. Just as he knew they were walking into an ambush. Oh, happy day. Alma hummed softly at his elbow. I finally get to kill something. He thought he felt the puddle's killer intent flicker at that, just a bit. Left, she asked. He nodded. Right? By the time the demon brothers thought to actually emerge from the puddle, it was already too late. Hinata had seen them. Naruto and Alma knew they were coming. But if they simply remained in hiding, they'd never have their target, and if they never struck, they'd never. Gozu and Meizu sprang up from their hiding place as one, tearing forward, diving at the unsuspecting Tazuna. And froze. Gozu gurgled in disbelief, his eyes bulging as his body tore itself apart from within. As if a pair of invisible hands had simply reached down inside him and started to pull. Pain, agony, it hurt. The last thing he saw was the dark-haired boy's smug smile before his body burst into flames, violently imploding projectile gore spattering the road in every direction. Alma hummed softly to herself, licking a droplet of blood off her pinky finger. Disgusting. Meizu fared little better. Despairing over the sudden and violent death of his brother, he surged forward, bounding past the dark-haired demon, vaulting over the petrified Hyuga. Strangely enough, their Jonin didn't even try to stop him, and so he managed to come within 3 feet of the bridge builder before his entire being convulsed. He willed his legs to move, but they betrayed him. Nothing would obey. Why did he suddenly feel so weak? Elevator to hell, an amused voice rumbled. Going down. Baffled, he looked down, only to find a clawed hand sticking through his chest. His heart, he realized, gawping at the distended, beating organ. Someone had punched right through his chest and gripped his heart. Then, to his horror, they squeezed, pulping it like a grapefruit. Crushing agony enveloped him from all sides, darkness closing in. The last thing he heard was a voice. Ooh, nice claws. I think I'll keep them. Oh, Tazuna-san, you've got some explainin' to do. Then there was only blackness. In relatively short order, Tazuna laid his soul bare and told the truth. To his disbelief, they didn't turn back. At first he was relieved when Kakashi decided that they would continue. Overjoyed even. But something worried him. That boy and his girl, they seemed almost bloodthirsty. Oh, they were perfectly charming with one another, but unlike the Hyuga girl, they made absolutely no attempts to conceal their desire for battle. And the way they just executed those 2 men, killed them in cold blood, it was more than a little unnerving to know his guardians might be even more dangerous than the men who wanted him dead. These kids, just what were they? You need to have more confidence in battle, Alma was saying to Hinata as he came back to himself, relentlessly chastising the girl for her poor performance during the ambush. What would you have done if those 2 turned on you instead of Tazuna? You would have died. But Alma-chan. Come on now, Naruto soothed. You can't blame her for freezing like that. They came out of nowhere. No buts, the black cat replied staunchly, glaring at him when he tried to come to the girl's defense. You saw her out there, husband. She was pitiful. And she has the Byakugan. She should have seen them coming and been thusly prepared. Those bright eyes snapped back to the faltering Hyuga, pinning her with merely a gaze. Hinata, if you are to work with my husband, then I will only tolerate your best. Do you understand what I am saying? Chai. They're a strange bunch, aren't they? He muttered. Kakashi merely nodded, his lone eye still fixed firmly in the pages of his book. You get used to them. Just be glad you didn't get on Alma's bad side. The craftsman sweatered up. That's her good side. Poor thing, she looked like she was about burst into tears under Alma's withering words. Did they have to be so harsh? And on that note, I expect no such weakness when I train you. That caught Tazuna flatfoot. The Hyuga, sword, Naruto said suddenly. Tazuna blinked, diverted from the heartwarming spectacle. Sword. The next thing he knew, the air was exploding out of his lungs as the blonde dive tackled him to the ground. Instead of losing his head, he simply lost his hat as the giant cleaver buzzed past and thudded into a tree. Not a moment later, a great giant of a man alighted atop it. Tazuna felt his blood turn to ice in his veins. Oh no. Not him. Anyone but him. Damn, his killer swore. I missed. Kakashi bristled, his book snapping shut with a resounding clap. I should have known it would be Yuzabuza. That you, Kakashi? Looks like you've got a few brats with you this time around. Alma's face lit up in delight as she both beheld and recognized the fabled Demon of the Mist. The challenge at last. Demon of the Mist. It was a nice title now that she thought about it. Demon of the Mist. Very nice. Why didn't SHE have a title like that? Why didn't Naruto, for that matter? They were awesome. Terrifying. They deserved titles. Something frightening, something that would strike terror in the hearts of the enemy. She quietly filed the thought away for later review. She'd have to consider it. So smiling, she stepped forwards. They say you're a demon, right? Zabuza frowned down at the girl standing before him. The head cleaver shifted restlessly over his shoulder, unable to hide its contempt. You're going to fight me? Please. Kakashi, tell the girl to beat it before I decide to carve her into little pieces. He half expected the poor girl to soil herself and run away. Poor man, he had no idea who he was messing with. When she smiled, he felt his confidence tremble, just a little bit. He had frightened grown men with that growl before, but this one? She didn't bat an eyelash. To his disbelief, her smile only deepened. No, she turned, pointing. Him. Naruto stepped forward, eyes flashing as he cracked his knuckles and shucked his coat. Odd, Zabuza thought. Why were those eyes red? That didn't make any sense, unless that just bloody wonderful chakra like blood crawled around the edges of his body, forming a small shroud round the blonde's toned form. By the time it had faded, the boy looked different. Rougher somehow. Feral. You look strong, he mused, his voice vibrating oddly with each word. Nay, sensei, is it all right if I go first? I'm a little out of practice. Tazuna balked. He crushes a man's heart and says he's out of practice? Kakashi was of the same mind. I wouldn't recommend it, Naruto. He's out of your league. Hey, only way to know is to try, right? He bounded once on the balls of his feet and beckoned. Come at me, bro. Hinata gulped. She'd never seen this side of him before. Naruto-kun. You're either very brave or very stupid. Well, Zabuza mused, the kid had balls if nothing else. Huge, brass balls. He'd enjoy breaking them. One hand rose above his head, drawing the fog around him. Terrify him first, show him how hopelessly outmatched he was, then finish him quickly. Kirigakure no Jutsu, hidden mist jutsu. Naruto frowned slightly as his opponent vanished from sight. What in the... You lose? The head cleaver descended mercilessly. It missed. To his disbelief, the boy dropped into a crouch, the massive blade cleaving only a few hairs from his head, nothing more. Nice one. Is it my turn now? When the counter came, Zabuza barely blocked in time. Even then he felt his entire arm shudder against it, his mighty Zanbato quivering in his grasp. He wasn't ready for the second. The blonde swung once more, but the fog impeded his vision, leaving him wide open. This time, his fist found nothing but empty air. Got you? And Zabuza's blade tasted blood. Half a heartbeat later, and the boy was lying face down in a pool of his own blood. Somewhere in the fog, he thought he heard the Hyuga scream. Then he heard something else. Not quite yet. Zabuza bristled as a wet, shucking sound greeted his ears, the sound of bone and sinew knitting back together. His head turned, one dark eye reappearing over his shoulder. No, that wasn't possible. He should be dead. He'd cut him clean through. A freaking horse would be dead from that. How was he? Somehow, someway, the kid was still moving. Oh wow, he hissed, sitting up. I really am rusty. I've never fought someone like you before. I was barely able to move in time. Guess I gotta train more. How are you still alive? Hyper reflexes. And did I mention that I'm insane? Naruto hummed happily as he stood up, the grievous gash slowly stitching itself shut, exposing flawless pink skin in its place. No? Funny, I would have thought the fact that I'm still standing made that quite clear. So, you're Zabuza, right? Nice Tami-cha. Saya looked nervous. Is it the eyes? The hell were you talking about? It's okay. Naruto only chuckled. Alma-chan says they scare a lot of people, but let me show you something really scary. Before his very eye, the boy dropped to all fours, his skin beginning to peel, exposing grisly scarlet beneath. Fangs flashed in the mist. One to four tails of chakra bubbled to life behind him, warping his body into that terrible creature that he'd only seen once before. White gold eyes glared out at him, a maw of deadly teeth spouting steam as the ground burst beneath it. A bead of sweat trickled down his brow. Well, that's not fair at all. The beast merely grinned. I can think of at least 11 reasons why we shouldn't do this. Really? I've already thought of a dozen why we should. Naruto and Alma. Inhuman. Take care when hunting monsters that you yourself, Sir Demon, do not become one. For if one stares into the void for too long, the void shall stare back. Zabuza woke slowly, these words ringing in his skull as his bruised eyes fluttered open. For a moment, just a moment in those bleary dregs before true wakefulness, he thought he recognized the voice. It belonged to a girl, felt almost certain he'd heard it once before. But his mind was muddled still and the thought slipped through grasping fingers, gone before he could remember it. Did he know her? He couldn't recall. Perhaps, had he been in his right mind, the demon of the mist would have realized something was wrong, then. As it were, he had more pressing concerns on his mind. Foremost amongst them, why am I alive? The infamous assassin knew not why he thought this yet, only that somewhere in the back of his mind, he'd expected to be dead. But that didn't make any sense. He'd never once gone into any battle expecting to be bested, let alone slain. So why did he feel so surprised to open his eyes? But as he was clearly not dead, he chose to take stock of his surroundings. Gradually, he became aware of the rest of his body, aches and pains making themselves manifest as he returned to himself. His eyes, painful as it was to look through those broken, bloodshot veins, eventually painted a dim picture for his beleaguered psyche. A room. He was in a room, a small one, that much was clear. Sprawled out in bed, covered by a thin sheet. Said room was only dimly alight, faintly luminous by candlelight. Yellow and orange light cast long shadows on the walls, painting them the color of a red sunset. Red, his favorite color. Other senses reasserted themselves, demanding his attention. Bandages, like rough sandpaper on his face. Everywhere really, but mostly the face. And there, another. One he knew. A pale face the color of white snow gazed back at him, dark brown eyes fraught with concern. Her hands gently peeled away dried bandages and administered fresh ones, applying salves where needed, and poultices in place of his burns. Zabuza watched her for a long moment, choosing silence over speaking. In the end, he hadn't long to wait. She started visibly when he grunted, her gaze snapping to his. Zabuza-sama? The mere movement of his head sent spikes of fire shrieking through injured tissue. An involuntary hiss snaked past clenched teeth. Gah. Easy, she soothed, pushing him back down when he tried to rise. He hadn't the strength to resist. But, lie still, the voice of his ally remained firm. She would brook no argument. You're badly injured. A glass of water pressed itself to his parched lips and he drank gratefully, for his throat felt like a scorched desert, and the cool liquid coursing through it, the most soothing sacred balm. What happened? You lost, came the flat reply. Incredulous, he started upright. I swear I'll get that little. Haku's voice was like steel, her hands firm on his wounded chest. You will do no such thing then, in a softer tone, she added, not until you heal. Besides, the matter is out of our hands, now. Zabuza bristled. Gato hired some other punk to take them out? Haku looked away, refusing to meet his gaze. In a sense, realizing he wouldn't get any answers, reluctantly, he acquiesced, slumping back to the bed. How long? 3 days, she replied. 3. The memories hit him like a sucker punch straight to the gut, knocking the wind right out of him. Red demon. Not a demon. A boy. Changing. becoming something else. Someone else. For tails. Skin like fire. Couldn't hurt him. Couldn't touch him. Couldn't even get close. Laughter, throaty and piercing, claws pointed at him. Defiance. My turn. Burning, ripping, tossing, tearing, the crunching of bone, pain in his right arm, his sword hurled away. Wait. Why couldn't he feel his arm? Zabuza blinked. Twice. 3 times. A grand total of 3 blinks passed, before he realized his sword arm wasn't simply missing, it was gone. Ending in a truncated stump wreathed in bloody bandages, the limb ended just below the elbow. Zabuza stared at for a long, terrifying eternity, struggling to move muscles that no longer existed. Nothing. All he received was a mute twitch from the ravaged appendage. It was then that the true severity of his wound finally hit him, agony upon agony clamping down on all thoughts, mind going white. That hurt. Actually, that really hurt. A lot. Then the shock hit and he went under again. Meanwhile, all right, I can't take it any more, just what the hell are you, kid? The table, nay, the entire room went silent at the sudden outburst. Naruto glanced up from his meal with a practiced smile, struggling not to scowl at Tezuna's abrupt inquiry. What do you mean? Just speaking those words, maintaining that light smile and sly, civil tone proved itself a mighty effort in and of itself. After all, when one could read minds, it was sometimes difficult not to read into their intentions and act on them. Not that it was a certain thing for the whiskered pariah, not by any means. He couldn't just poke around in a man's psyche at will like Alma, but he'd grown most adept at sensing emotions. He'd spent the last 3 days honing that skill. That talent, among others, had finally brought tensions to a head. Naruto stole a glance at Kakashi from where their scarecrow of a sensei leaned against the wall. Honestly, he was surprised that the Jonin hadn't deigned to say something until now. Sure enough, their teacher had his face buried in that insidious orange book, resolving not to interfere. As ever, the man's thoughts were blank to him. Didn't matter. The more chakra one had, the more difficult it became for him. In the case of exceedingly powerful individuals like the old man, it was nearly impossible. But it was downright easy with civilians, really. As if they were all books, to be browsed at his and Alma's leisure. Unfortunately, Tezuna, in all his faults, was very, very easy to read. I will, came sputtering reply. Really, I don't, the Jinchuriki amended softly, his gaze never wavering from the elders. Why don't you spell it out for me? Is this about the demon brothers? Zabuza? Maybe those goons I cut up last night? Please, by all means, explain. Yet another pair of Gado's pathetic hired thugs had attempted a raid last night. They'd thought themselves clever, attacking by cover of night. Instead, their daring midnight raid had turned into an absolute massacre at the hands of the 2 teens. And unlike the aforementioned shinobi, they had no skills to speak of beyond their paltry talent at swordplay. He's afraid of you, the soft, dulcet tones of Alma's voice answered before Naruto could finish that thought or reply. Satisfaction radiated off of his dark goddess in waves as she leaned her head into the crook of his shoulder, her every thought warm with fervor and approval. Must be. Afraid? Me? That hurts. You wound me. Golden eyes narrowed to thinly veiled slits and he feigned clutching at his chest. And here I thought we were friends. Across the table, Hinata sighed quietly as she sipped at her tea. Her eyes never opened, even when the young Hyuga tilted her head in his direction. Tezuna-san, her voice radiated quiet amusement, as though she were in on a joke he'd missed. That was rude. Oh, bugger it all. A few days ago, she wouldn't have dared to even say that much. Now, Tezuna wasn't the best judge of character to begin with, but even he could see that the wielder of the Byakugan had changed. When they'd arrived, she'd been a stuttering mess. Now, she wasn't. He didn't believe in magic or the occult, and he certainly didn't trust in all this psychic, otherworldly mumbo-jumbo, yet something was clearly wrong here. He was old, and despite all his years, he liked to believe a person could change, but overnight? There were limits to his incredulity. No way the boy had anything to do with it, which meant that strange, almost ethereal waif of a girl who shadowed Naruto every waking moment. A dark shape in his dreams, a sinister specter who told him terrible things, thoughts he'd rather not think about. It could not be said that the living could haunt you, but it seemed that the universe made an exception for Alma Wade. Sweet Cammy above and below, she terrified him. Now she preened, meeting his gaze as if to say, "Yes, I am responsible," squaring her shoulders slightly beneath his widened eyes. Little did he know, she was responsible. For slowly driving him mad, of course. But for other aspects as well. She wasn't sure if she'd ever willingly share Naruto with another female. Not now, perhaps. Not ever. Hinata was, however, a part of their team, and she couldn't willingly ignore her because she was of the F.E.A.R section. He would hate her for that, Naruto would. Like it or not, they were stuck with Hinata for the time being. Shy, weak, indecisive Hinata. Not if Alma had anything to say about it. If he was to have an ally, a teammate, then she'd resolve to make sure he had both. Naturally, some improvements had been made. Flashback. Hinata balked at her reflection. Those eyes. They weren't the same. They were Alma's. And yet also hers. Eyes both pale and bright stared back her in the mirror, but that wasn't all. She felt different. Stronger. Confident. Her head buzzed with a wealth of new information, yet at the same time she felt a rising surge of deep, deep dread in the pit of her stomach. She didn't know what was happening to her, and on some level, it frightened her. Thus worried, she turned to confront the one who had done this to her. "I don't understand, what did you do?" Alma smiled, pressing a finger to her lips. "You'll see." End flashback. Tsunasun? The builder blinked, looking away from those striking eyes. You could get lost in those eyes, slip away, forget you ever existed. You're staring. Now wait just a minute, the portly man scrambled to recover, wildly waving his hands before his chest. "I'm not trying to start anything here. I'd just like an explanation is all." Naruto stifled a laugh. Even the poorest of jokes seemed to leave their client scrambling. "Alright, shoot. What are you?" The question, rather, the abruptness of it nearly floored the blonde pariah, like a splinter stabbing beneath the skin. What was he indeed? He'd often wondered that very same thing. Whatever he was, he certainly wasn't human, not anymore. He hadn't been for quite some time. What did that make him, then, when he didn't need to eat for days on end, when sleep was something he seldom required? When you could rip apart a man in an instant, with nothing more than your bare hands? When you dreamed of death and darkness and the world's end? What did that make you? More importantly, what am I? Tsuna's question, blundering though it might have been, had wounded the genin. Even so, he refused to acknowledge it. Outwardly at least. Instead he slapped a cheery grin onto his face. Pearly white teeth flashed in a small smile, and mentally he walled himself off, throwing up barrier in his mind's eye. He told himself he didn't see the hurt that flashed through Alma's eyes. "Do you really want to know?" A swift, jerky bob of the head followed. "Fine," he conceded, brushing a hand against the hilt on his back. "If you must know." To his credit, the bridge builder successfully managed to not gawp at the massive Zanbato taking up 3/4 of the boy's back and instead look straight into his eerie, golden eyes. Funny how something so simple could intimidate someone. Wham, here I am, just the sight of these eerie orbs, of having them trained on you, that spoke more than mere words could. It wasn't the man's fault, Naruto reminded himself. He had nothing but respect for Tsuna's intentions in trying to feel his people. After all, mankind often feared what they could not understand. "I am me," he decided to say at last. Nothing more, nothing less. "Don't be glib," a flicker of courage sparked in the older man's eyes. "You know what I mean." Naruto arched an eyebrow. "Last I checked, I was me," he continued, raising a glass to his mouth, swallowing. The once sweet juice tasted bitter on his tongue, and he had to force himself not to gag as he turned his attention back to what little remained of his dinner. "I am what I am," came the continuation as he shoveled another generous helping of eggs into his mouth. "Doesn't matter. I'm on your side, and I am not going to hurt you unless you plan on sticking me with that fork of yours." Tsuna's gaze snapped to the utensil clutched tight in his white-knuckled hand, lingered, then swung back to the still stoic Naruto. How did he know that? It felt as though the boy had reached into the deepest, darkest part of his self and snatched up the thought before his mind could birth it. Had he truly been thinking of that? Was he afraid? Was he? No, Tazuna told himself, he couldn't possibly be. Sure, the kid freaked him out, and yes, he was rather frightening when he wanted to be, and he'd taken Zabuza apart like he was nothing, and oh god, I am afraid of him. Before he could reply, Alma wiggled her fingers and the sharp implement rocketed out of his grasp towards the ceiling, where it rammed itself in the roof with a dull thud. Her head tilted, pearly white teeth flashing in a small, serene smile. That was all it took. I think I need some rest. Tazuna stood and hurriedly excused himself from the table before the mounting tension could claim him. He already felt the beginnings of a nervous breakdown coming on as he scaled the stairs, 2 steps at a time. It wasn't until he'd closed slammed and locked the bedroom door behind him that he allowed himself to relax, back slumping against the weathered wood. Raising a trembling hand to his forehead, he swiped a bead of sweat away from his brow. Honestly, if building that damn bridge didn't kill him, these crazy kids just might. That was excessive, Naruto. Alma. Hey, I didn't do anything. Naruto smiled softly and returned to his meal. Kakashi looked like he might argue the point, but in the end he fell silent. He knew the boy would speak no more of it, just as Alma would brook no argument on the matter. Doing his best to appear gormless, the copycat sighed and returned his attention to the Ika novel occupying his hand. For all of a moment. Why do you even bother? Today really isn't my day. For a moment, just a moment, Hatake dared to hope that Naruto was just going to ignore the runt and let bygones be bygones. Unfortunately, that prayer wasn't answered. Naruto pointedly took 5 seconds to finish chewing, swallowed. Then, and only then did he turn his pale eyes on Inari. The boy wasn't even looking at him. His gaze remained fixed firmly on the floor beneath his hat. A weighted silence passed between the pair, young and old, before one of them finally spoke. Beg pardon? Why do you even act like that? Tazuna's grandson snapped. And the runt speaks. Alma sighed, idly twirling a knife in her hand. Go away, boy. You can't just scare everyone away, Inari cried, thrusting his head up. One day they're going to come back and kill you. Alma opened her mouth to reply, but, to his own surprise, Naruto actually snarled. Huh. The boy was an open book to him. Even if Tsunami hadn't told them, it was almost painfully easy to see that the boy had baggage. Knowing the specifics only made it more painful. In another life, another universe, he might have actually sympathized with the poor boy. Not this one. He could understand Inari's pain, but that was the depth of his empathy. When he saw him, he saw himself as he might have been, someone who had all but given up. So what if he was young? If he was weak? Better to die trying to get back at life, rather than let life break you. Anything, so long as it was better than being a coward. That same cowardice disgusted him. His body shifted on the stool, pivoting to face the whelp. If you're gonna whine, then do something about it, like me. Don't expect me to change because you have daddy issues. Inari colored. Change? You don't know anything about me, you're just some elitist ninja you've never lost. Anything. Behind him, Alma and Hinata sucked in a simultaneous gasp. And that, ladies and gentlemen, proved to be the final straw for Uzumaki Naruto. Those golden ocean orbs became brittle in an instant, calm, placid pools of saffron snapping into angry slits. He exhaled softly, slowly, leaned forward in his chair. Young as he was, Inari didn't realize the mistake he'd just made. He was too blinded by his own anger and pain to see the killer intent flashing in the eyes of the older boy. You done? No, I'm not. Inari never saw the fist, but he certainly felt it. One moment the blonde had been seated across from him. The next, someone or something flung him halfway across the room. A sizable dent had laid claim to the right side of his face, the impact already beginning to purple and bruise as he lay there, stunned. Yes, Naruto lowered his arm and leaned back in his chair, disgust etched across his face. You're done. I've lost more than you'll ever know, brat. No comparison. Liar. Oh, Buthfaku. Naruto's mouth twisted from a faint smirk into a decidedly ugly smile. Glowering, he stood, leering down at the boy. If you have trust issues, then man up and do something about it. But no, not you. What did you do? You did nothing. Have done nothing. Nothing. If it was me, and they tried to take my precious person away, you know what I'd do? I'd tear their fucking arms off. Inari flinched at the raw pain in the blonde's voice and tried to back away, but the whiskered warrior wasn't finished. No, not yet. But you'll gak? Even as Inari spoke, Naruto moved again. In a singed blur of red and black and yellow, the Jinchuriki lashed out, snagging the younger boy by the collar and hauling him off the floor. Hinari struggled, but his captor was lean like a whipcord, a solid wall of will and muscle, one that refused to so much as budge. Eyes like tainted honey bored into his, those eerie golden irises seemed to engulf his entire vision. When he spoke, it felt like better than sitting on your hands, kid. Tears gathered in his eyes. Boo. Oh, fuck off. With a snarl, he threw Inari down, stormed out, and slammed the door behind him. Hinata said nothing. Without another word, Alma opened the door and went out after Naruto into the night. Kakashi supposed he knew why. Meanwhile, unbelievable, how the hell am I supposed to make a damn profit when my boys keep dying? Gato was sweating bullets. Within good reason. 15 of his men had mysteriously vanished overnight, and at least twice that had up and quit after what had happened to Zabuza. A score more were on the fence, torn between their greed and the mysterious, unseen force that seemed to assail them every night. Some said it was a girl. Others, a young woman. Still others claimed that it was something else altogether, a nameless, shapeless force that rendered all resistance bloody smears on the walls. Ghost or not, death was bad for business, and his business was losing its grip on Wave. With the demon brothers dead, Zabuza maimed, and that little snow bitch refusing to fight, he'd found himself hard-pressed for solutions. At least he had been, until an answer had shown up on his doorstep and butchered the guards at the gate to his club. His eyes snapped to a darkened corner booth, where the supposed solution was waiting. Look, I'm paying you a small fortune after what happened to Zabuza, he snarled. You let me down, and mark my words, I'll have your ass blacklisted. You needn't worry. The shadows shifted, exposing what might have been a man, lounging. I always honor my agreements, even with fools like yourself. He still wasn't sure what the bastard looked like beneath that weird half-mask of his. It hid his eyes and face, but left the mouth exposed, just enough to let him know he was being mocked. Creepy. But he'd dealt with worse in his career, and he had nowhere else to turn. So if he had to put up with another freak in order to kill a freak, then so be it. Well, go out and get them, he demanded. The red shadows shifted. No. Huh. I said no. They think us to be prey. Once more the darkness shifted imperceptibly, exposing pearly white teeth. They think that you're men, and by definition you, are weak. Alma does not tolerate weakness, and I doubt that her proxy will either. Naturally, they will come to us. It's exciting, don't you think? A demented laugh trickled through the black. Survival of the fittest at its finest. Eat or be eaten. Kill or be killed. Oh, it's been so long now I can hardly wait. Gato had shrank back the moment his ally had begun to speak. The fervor in his voice was downright disconcerting. Frightening even. You'd better be the real deal, bub. The shadows roiled, coiling in anticipation. More than you could ever know, little man. Back with Naruto. Stupid pissbucket shark jumping bullshit. The head cleaver swung down in a savage arc, launching itself at its next victim. Thrown with incredible force, the massive Zanbato veritably leaped from Naruto's hand, hurling itself from his grasp and into the grove in a blur of matte gray and steel. A dull crunch signaled the end of yet another tree. A single swing sent the tree sailing into the night, caroming off of a nearby stump. Naruto grunted. Damn it. A single thought recalled the blade to his hand like a boomerang. Upon catching the weapon, he hefted it downward, glowering. His reflection stared back at him from within the battered steel, eyes blazing like twin suns in his skull. His jaw remained set and angry, determined and fierce beneath battered blonde bangs. He scarcely recognized himself. Not just in this stranger staring back at him, but in the accusations he'd received. Damn it. With a roar he spun and flung the blade away, hurling it into the night from whence he'd come. A distant crash answered, one easily ignored. Since his savage dispatching of Zabuza, the atmosphere had grown chilly, to say the least. They'd reached the man's home with little incident, yet the bridge builder was positively terrified after what he'd seen. Naruto didn't blame him. A slaughter like that was a bit much for anyone to accept. Perhaps he had gone overboard, calling on the fox's power in such great measure, but he hadn't been willing to take chances. A single attack nearly cleaved him in two. To come at his foe with anything less than his full strength was an insult to him as much as his adversary. The demon of the mist was dead because of that, he told himself. Had to be. He'd ripped his arm off, burned him, and tossed him in the lake to drown. The chances of his survival were slim to none. Granted, there had been that hunter Neen who'd wished to claim the body. Weary from using the cloak at such a high level, he'd allowed her to go about her business and retrieve the battered, broken body. By all rights, that was it. Gato had no other known shinobi in his employ, merely a gang of hired thugs who liked to frequent the bars and brothels built by the nasty little despot. A despot who was about to get a midnight visit at his club. By rights, this was over. Wasn't it? And even if he'd been wrong, even if by some miracle their foe returned, he felt certain in his ability to squash him a second time. There was nothing wrong with being proud of his strength, Naruto told himself. He had every right to be. He wasn't arrogant. Wasn't different. He couldn't be. He was still himself. Right? Penny for your thoughts? Naruto wasn't even surprised to find Alma behind him, serene and smiling as always. Oddly enough, she had the head cleaver with her, held firmly in hand. Even after all these years he still wondered at it. How the bloody hell did she keep doing that? But he wasn't in the mood, not now. He turned away from her. I want to be alone. Too bad for you. Then, she sidled up to him in spite of his protest. I want to be here. Before he could even think to stop her, his dark goddess slipped inside his guard, laid her head against his shoulders, and placed a gentle kiss on the back of his neck. Naruto stiffened, a naked hiss snaking between his teeth at the unexpected intimacy. She laughed and stood on her tiptoes, placing another just behind his ear. Naruto shuddered, his resolve beginning to crumble as her hands danced across his back, touching, tormenting, distracting. Alma, come on. Knock it off. A soft, velvet giggle answered him. Why are you hiding from yourself? The blonde bristled, stiffening beneath her ministrations. I ain't hiding. He felt her mouth curl in a pout against the back of his jaw. I thought we agreed not to lie each other. Naruto nearly bit his own tongue off. He stood there for a long moment, her arms wrapped around him, contemplating. When he finally spoke, his voice sounded very small to Alma. It's just I don't understand myself anymore. She felt him tremble against her, shaking. When I fight, it's like I'm a completely different person. And now I wonder sometimes, am I even human? He glanced down at his scarred fist, tracing the pale white lines with his eyes. You changed me. I know that. Hell, I'm damn thankful for it. But it feels like I'm still changing. I used to be terrified of taking a life. Now it's like no one cares. Like I don't care. Likey? Naruto blinked as those slim arms tightened around him fiercely. I care. Alma's voice was muffled against his back, but her intentions were clear as day. You know that, right? Her voice wavered a little, just at the end. It was the most vulnerable he'd ever heard her, and it stunned him back into silence all over again. I care about you more than anything else in the world. I want you. Need you. You're my light. Please don't be angry at me. Please. I couldn't bear it. I never said I was Mahe. Before he could finish, she spun him around, slammed the head cleaver into the grounds, and pressed her lips to his, her mouth covering his in another of her fierce, fiery kisses. So taken aback was he by the sudden lip lock that he nearly didn't react at first. Not until she thrust him backwards, until he realized she was forcibly holding him against the tree, welding him there with her lips. She held him there for what felt like a small eternity, but that blissful time finally ended as she pulled away. An awkward silence passed between the two of them. Okay, Naruto coughed aloud, slowly touching two fingers to his mouth. That was distracting, but I don't see the point. Do I have to kiss you again? She glowered blackly. Naruto's coughing turned to an outright sputter. Well, I wouldn't be opposed to that. Her expression turned slightly coy. Then her mouth met his. Alma raised a leg, twining herself with him as she pushed him still deeper into the tree, the weathered bark splintering beneath her strength. His hands rose seemingly of their own accord, cupping her rear through the fabric of her pants. Squeezing. Kneading. Drawing her closer. A deep, throaty moan, more a growl than anything else, rippled between them. The sheer audacity of such a sound caught the blonde off guard. His stomach pulled a 180 and his heart nearly burst from anticipation. It reminded him of their frantic kiss in the alley, but there was something deeper to this. Darker. Her fingers fumbled awkwardly at his jacket, trying to find the clasp, failing miserably, until he helped her. His vision had an almost pleasant fog to it now, angry and fierce, until, abruptly, she drew away. Her hands ghosted across his torso one last time, rising to cup his face. You're mine, she ground out, rubbing her cheek against his. No one else can have you, you hear me? Naruto laughed. Yours. This was warm and slow, a fire warming him to his toes. Better, she beamed. Better. Her smile didn't diminish in the slightest. Everybody's got a knife, she replied, turning the blade over in her hand. Everyone has a vendetta. You take this? Smiling, she tossed him the sword. Naruto caught it effortlessly, snatching the hilt up out of the air, in an instant and twirled, bringing it about with grace and poise. Use it. Go dig around in our friend Gato, she urged, get a little red on your hands. It's always healthy to express yourself. You keep it bottled up too long, and you might do something you regret. So, just cut the problem to pieces, then? Naruto laughed, and with that laugh, felt the weight of the world leave his shoulders. I have a growing lack of disgust for you. You'd best. Alma replied primly. You're going to be stuck with me for quite some time. Silence pushed its way between them, then, the weight of her words pushing down on him. So Ri going to kill Gato, then? She sighed then, indeed, she was silent for a long moment. Then, abruptly, she thrust a hand forward. Come with me. Later. Naruto frowned. Why are we here? The tiny town of Wave was little more than a rough shanty town, broken and decrepit. Despair seemed to hang about like a fog, thick and cloying. The sheer opacity of negativity here nearly made him choke. Calls for food and water drifted through his ears, plaintive and weak. Now do you see? Alma said. He glanced down as Alma's hand closed around his. The feeble tug was just enough to attract his attention. Following her gaze, he found himself facing a rather brightly lit square, a large building in the center, a veritable beacon in the gloom, surrounded by questionable-looking individuals of varying ill repute. That, and the host of foul emotions radiating off the crowd all but clinched it for him. All right, if the bastard ain't there, I don't know where the hell he is. Ladies first. The bouncer squinted at them when they cut through the line, frowning. His hand fingered the sword at his belt. Oi, brats. Read the sign. No underage. Is Gato here? Alma asked innocently. Well, yeah, this is his seal. His words trailed off when he recognized the hulking weapon on Naruto's back. Ah, shit. Yup. In an impossible move, Alma flowed up and around the burly bouncer, swatting his sword aside and thrusting an arm through his portly gut in one savage, rippling movement. Thin legs locked around the burly man's waist and pulled, slamming him down into the concrete. First, scarlet streamers of blood spattered outward in a grisly spray. By the time the man's heavy-set body struck the ground, she was already standing, uncaring for the bloody stains on her face. Shall we? She asked, over the screams of the crowd. Naruto's eyes twinkled brightly. What? Whistling a merry tune, he drew the head cleaver and waltzed after her into the club. Madness is a terrifying, yet amusing thing. Madness offers that which we all seek. Madness removes reality. Madness sets us free. Possess us. Come out and play, little pig. Alma's arms swung through the burly body of a hapless thug as she sang a merry tune to herself. The brute died slowly for his temerity, tumbling to the ground to clutch at the grisly red trench she'd carved through his chest. Pulsating lights danced in her peripherals like mad fireflies as she stepped over him and waded back into the breach, her senseless slaughter punctuated by the pounding percussion of music she didn't understand. She cared not a whit for any of it. If there was to be a soundtrack to her slaughter, then so be it. None of it mattered to her, anyway. Their feeble shrieks were all the music she needed. Monster, demon, help. Laughing all the while, she carved a bloody swathe through Gato's so-called club, laying into its denizens them with little remorse. Why shouldn't she? There were no innocents here. Not anymore. She'd already seen to that. The slaves and those hauled into the club against their will had promptly fled once the slaughter began. The rest were little more than hired muscle or those who thought themselves untouchable. Arrogant fools too confident in their own power or pathetic sycophants looking to cozy up to the tycoon in hopes of snatching some small sliver of his wealth for themselves. In the end, they were fuel. Fuel for the inferno that was Alma Wade. There would be no mercy found for them here. Every kill strengthened her, each more than the last. Each death fueled her powers, stoking the flame of her wrath. And if their deaths should prompt the little piglet known as Gato to show his face sooner, all the better. It wasn't as if they'd be running out of bodies anytime soon. With Zabuza out of the picture, the meager mercenaries offered little in the way of meaningful resistance at that. Those wise enough to flee from her didn't get far. None would be spared. All who served the pig would die this day. Tales of their atrocities would spread throughout the elemental nations and further cement their legend. Death had come for them, one and all. None would be spared. As for those who did flee, Alma's golden gaze slipped southward just in time to see a streak of blood and steel bifurcate one such unfortunate individual. Naruto. She'd been so caught up in the glory of the hunt that she'd nearly forgotten about him. That wouldn't do. Losing herself in a battle high was one thing, but to forget about her most precious person in doing so was unforgivable. He was her light, her love, her everything and her all. No, to forget him was to forget herself. Without him she would never have found an anchor in this world, a reason to live, to exist. Nevertheless, a thrill of anticipation rippled through her as she watched him work. The young man before her was a far cry from the boy she'd met all those years ago. That one would have flinched in the face of such carnage, ducked his head and screamed until it went away. This one was a berserker in the truest sense of the word. He fought on as a storm of blows rained down on him, uncaring for the wounds he sustained. There was no regard for his own safety. Only victory. Crushing the skull of one adversary even as he disemboweled another with the Kubikurabocho, he dispatched them all with quiet confidence. As swiftly as the slaughter had begun, it ended. The last body fell and the club went silent. Only that hideous music persisted. A stray thought flicked a table in the booth's direction and the ugly tune cut off with a sharp squeal of static. Exhaling sharply, Alma turned to face her companion and caught him in the act of wringing blood from his hair. His petulant expression drew a small giggle from the goddess. There was just something so Naruto about it that she couldn't help herself. A dainty hand rose to stifle her laughter, to no avail. She just couldn't help herself. Wherever Blonde was involved, she simply lost all inhibitions. Simply put, there were no means of restraint for her when he was nearby. After all, he was hers and she was his, until the end of time. Perhaps even longer than that, given their lifespans. When the day finally came that death parted them, she'd happily follow him into the abyss. Perhaps it might be foolish of her to think such things of him. Some might even condemn such a twisted mindset. Alma no longer cared. Her fate was sealed. She would have him until his dying day. No one else would have him. She'd kill any who tried. How lucky I am. Ah, hell, the whiskered warrior muttered to himself, gazing in vain at his ruined clothes. I really like this jacket. Gonna take forever to get the blood out. He paused then, noticing her smile. What? Why are you laughing like that, Alma? Was it something I said? For some reason, his words made her snicker all the more. Something about the sight of him made her warm. She couldn't help but be stricken by how lucky she was. In a world with countless individuals, she'd found the one person who could understand her. No one else mattered. Despite her best efforts, she doubled over, clutching at her sides. Haha. Naruto crossed his arms. You can stop now. It's not that funny. No, it's nothing. I'm fine. Nuzzling against his side, she leaned her head against his shoulder. Never betray me, Naruto-kun. Huh? He blinked, frowning down at her. Why in blazes would I do that? I'm not an idiot. Alma tilted her head, adopting an innocent facade. Well, you do have your moments sometimes. Aggressively, his arms circled her waist. I'd rather die. She purred, turning in his arms. I'll hold you to that, then. Lust seized her, and without thought for where they were, Alma shoved him. The blonde grunted in surprise but didn't resist her affections as his back greeted the wall. Stepping to him, the dark-haired goddess all but crushed him against it and flung her arms around his neck in a loose noose. The coppery tang of blood filled her nose, but it could have been roses for all she cared. Strong hands hitched under her legs, scooping her up with ease, even as she locked them around his waist. Her mouth opened for him gladly, yielding to his tongue, twining with hers as she crushed the entirety of her being against him. Alas, it ended all too soon for her. Far, far, far too soon for Alma's liking. A small moan fled from her when he pulled away. No, don't you dare. Sorry, but we can't afford to waste-o. Outraged by what she viewed as an extraordinarily brief tease, Alma bit his lip in protest. The action stirred a growl in him and he nipped her neck, drawing a surprised gasp from her. With her blood already up, this action nearly sent her plummeting over the edge. This time, when he pulled away, Naruto didn't allow her to retaliate. Not enough. Nowhere near enough. She didn't want him to stop, she wanted more. Her very blood sang out, and her face burned. Her thoughts revolted, sanity threatened to vanish in a pleasant haze of desire. Ruthlessly, she strangled her emotions, tamping them down and slamming a lid on them. There would be time enough for that later. She'd make certain of that. For now, they needed to apprehend Gato and take his head. That would put an end to this, swiftly and quickly. Yet, even so, to end things on such a note. I love you, the words escaped her in a rush. The bloody blonde blinked in surprise. Well, that was kind of sudden. Her eyes blazed up at him. Wrong answer. Kidding. He released her waist to raise his hands in defense, affectionately patting her head. I love you too, you know. Geez, you're scary sometimes. I enjoy being scary, husband. Alma preened. His eyes flashed red. Oi, I ain't your husband. Not yet, she grinned fiercely. Reluctantly releasing her chosen one, the young telekinetic adjusted her outfit and turned toward what she could only assume was another door. What remained of it? Someone must have flung it wide open in their haste to escape, and in their haste, paid the price. The blood spattered across its splintered frame told her all she needed to know. Had she killed that one in her blood frenzy? Or had Naruto done the deed? She couldn't remember. That was a lot of bodies piled up back there. Shall we proceed then? She favored him with a rare smile. That little pig is waiting for us, after all. So Gato's a pie? A pig will be a pig, Naruto. While that may be so, I kind of feel bad for him now. Levering the blade, Naruto advanced. Careful, the Jinchuriki warned. Something isn't right about this place. He sniffed once, making a face. That next room feels off. Alma tilted her head. Oh, how so? Is it trapped? Let's see. The blonde swung his blade through the arch, with devastating results. A single arc shattered what was left of the door and bit deeply into the frame. If there was a trap, it wasn't triggered by steel. So he did care. Her heart warmed at the thought. Still, his caution was unnecessary. If there truly was one final enemy lying in wait, they would have struck by now. And if they hadn't, they were a coward. Still, perhaps it wouldn't hurt to get a bearing on their remaining enemies. It would be troublesome if any of them were to escape after all. Flinging her senses outward, Alma closed her eyes and saw. Well, Naruto burned before her like the sun itself, a veritable beacon of vitality. Turning her senses outward, she detected a handful of living beings remaining in the building. One of them was Gato, a pale quivering mess in one of the upper floors. Another lurked just down the hall, flickering in her sixth sense like a candle in the wind, as though it might disappear at any moment. The remaining two weren't hard to determine at all, if only for the close proximity they had to one another. She identified them as a heavily wounded Zabuza likely being tended to by the very hunter ninja who'd ferried him away. Well, it was good to know they were nearby. That would make the next phase of her plan all the easier. It hinged on their cooperation after all. She had ideas for them. Perhaps sensing her intentions, Naruto shook his head and shouldered his newly claimed sword. No, there's definitely something there, he insisted. I can't tell if it's a jutsu or not. You're imagining things. Whatever it is, it's no match for us. Nudging him aside, she stepped through the arch. Alma, I wouldn't do that. Laughing, she stepped toward the next room. See, I told you. Nothing to worry about. What are you doing? What am I doing? She blinked, baffled by his sudden turn in behavior. Whatever do you mean? To her dismay, he turned his back on her. Disgusting. Alma froze. No. Naruto most certainly did not wait, because he jerked away from her touch as though he'd been scalded. The hurt, the betrayal in his eyes pierced her clean through. Alma shrank back, unable to bear the weight of his gaze. The anger, the pain in her eyes was a knife, stabbing her over and over and over and over. Get away from me, you twisted bitch. I can explain, she cried. I did it for you. You did it for yourself, he spat. And the whole time, I let myself be led around by the nose. A bitter laugh exploded out of his throat. And I fell for it hook, line, and sinker like some lovesick puppy, you know. In my head, I thought we had something. That you cared. Despair crashed down around her in a wave. No, not please don't say that I do care, I do. You make me sick. And with that, her precious world fell apart. Until a hand plunged through the scene and seized her shoulder. Release. Genjutsu. Or a vision. An illusion, perhaps? What? She blinked furiously. Hey, Naruto's voice felt distant to her ears, as though spoken from a great distance. Snap out of it? The world around her shattered like so much glass at his touch, and the Naruto before her vanished alongside it. In disbelief, she blinked, momentarily startled to find a rusted kunai jutting out of her stomach. Disgusted by the wound as much as her brief bout of unexpected weakness, she ripped the weapon free and stepped over the threshold. The wound closed by the time she'd taken her third step. In the time it took to make the fifth, her thoughts were already turning inward. Unacceptable. To think, she'd nearly been taken in by such a simple trick. Murderous didn't even begin to quantify her emotions. She was well past volcanic rage and into the realm of glacial hatred. The one who'd inflicted this torment upon her would suffer 1,000 deaths. No, death was too good for the likes of them. She'd tear the flesh from their bones, heal them, and tear it off again. 1,000 knives, 1,000,000 needles, the worst form of pain imaginable. Oi, now, Naruto squawked, seeing her eyes turn red. Let's just calm down, no need to nuke the place. I was caught in the genjutsu too, and you don't see me going. Well, a new voice chimed, interrupting, that's unfortunate. And here I was hoping to separate you two. Irritated, the ashen goddess craned her neck. Turned to face the speaker. Her mind froze. Wrong. Her very being recoiled from the sight. Shadows in the shape of a man. No, not quite shadows. They ran across his body in a mismatched weave of dark ebony, etched around a combat vest bearing weapons that stirred striking memories in her. Something in her quailed at the sight of him. His body was wrong, twisted and warped as though he'd stepped too early from the mold. Its jaw was warped, shorn in half, yet still, it somehow spoke. One arm ended in terrifying claws. The other bulged with inhuman muscle, raw and angry. Monster. Beast. Abomination. Her mind bleated out the words even as she struggled not to look upon it. Fight or flight warred within her, and she found herself stepping back in spite of it. Whomever he was, his face lay concealed behind a cracked mask imbued with the likeness of some strange creature she didn't understand. Whatever it was, they were looking at her. Damn it, this is annoying, he growled, scratching the back of his head. Here we went to all the trouble finding this world, and all this time passed. This shouldn't have happened. A grotesque hand rose. Time to come home, Alma. Something in his voice petrified her. Naruto stiffened. Oi, who the hell do you think you are? That blank visor turned toward him. Fall. Irk? Alma lazily raised a finger in the ninja's direction, golden eyes never once leaving Naruto's as he slammed to the floor. You have 3 seconds before I destroy you. A distorted laugh answered her. Shaken in my boots, missy? Had she been of a better mind, she would have seen their adversary's face, the flash of murderous intent in those eerie eyes. Eyes like hers, yet not hers. Something about them unnerved her, made her not want to see, not want to look at them. This enemy, this foe, this villain who'd laid Naruto out so easily. Who are you? In answer, the abomination lashed out with a booted foot. Catching Naruto in the stomach, he launched the whiskered youth from the room in a streak of crimson, ripping him out of the building and casting him into the street. Alma's gaze snapped toward the gaping hole leading outside, only for her body to betray her once more. Despite her anger, despite her rage, she found herself retreating yet again in the face of Dancer, suffering an unexplained panic as the man-creature reached for her. Again her powers failed her. Stay away from me. Orders are orders, Wade, came the reply. I'm bringing you back. Back where? She didn't want to think about Fatno. No, mustn't think about it, must not. Eerie orbs the color of poisoned honey cut to his. Power flickered through them. Narrowed. Focused. Die. That was all the monstrosity heard before a wall of telekinetic force laid it flat on the floor. Rather, it should have. Instead of being ground to a pulpy mass as she intended, their adversary simply raised a hand and batted the wall of bone-crushing force aside with exceptional ease. Indeed, it seemed to grow stronger from it, as she looked on the Notquidian twitched visibly. A strange, ghastly sigh erupted from its ruined mouth and its hollowed throat, trickling out into the air between them in a rush of steam. Adelicious? That is no. How did that happen? Their target shifted the mask on his face, eyes gleaming. It's the nature of man to make monster, and it is the nature of monster to destroy their makers. Leering at her, the creature cocked its head. It's only fair, considering you created me, don't you agree? Alma froze. That's saying. Wah. A sneer greeted her. Father sends his regards. Kubikir Bocho erupted from the creature's stomach with a devastating crunch of bone and blood, sending the entity Alma could only think to call it the creep stumbling forward in disbelief. Its curved edge jutting vertically out of the wound, the mighty cleaver drilled its prey to the ground and wedged it between a wall. Sheathed in crimson chakra, the towering blade seemed to hum for an excruciating moment, burnished with raw power. A heartbeat of silence passed between both parties as they processed the sudden attack. Neither moved. Neither blinked. They scarcely breathed. That is, until Alma beheld a familiar shock of blonde hair looming behind her adversary. Hello, friend. The creep twitched, its body spasming. A pair of crimson eyes blazed back. You little sure. Rough hands twisted the hilt in a mighty heave, and it knew no more. It was a quick cut. Efficient. Brutal. And far quicker than she would have liked. Regardless, the result was the same. The severed halves of its body sluiced away from the head cleaver, dropping to the ground with a revolting spatter. Alma half expected them to spring back up and lay hands on her. They nearly did. When one side twitched, Naruto brought the chakra-coated blade down again in silent anger, quartering the already diced half. He cut down once, twice, thrice. 4 times for good measure. By the time he was finished, nothing remained but a red stain on the ground and a few tattered scraps of clothing. Naruto blew out a breath, wiped the blood from his nose, and stood. The world remained silent, broken only by the distant crackling of faulty wiring. Naruto limped to her side, favoring his right leg. A distant, detached part of her mused. She saw it. The right had been blown clean off just past the ankle. Hopefully, and with a bit of luck, he'd be able to regenerate from this. She'd hate to have impeded his career. Even then she didn't move, not until he laid a hand on her shoulder. Her body moved with a spasm, bright eyes instinctively seeking her precious person. What was that thing? Trembling, Alma shifted to his side. A bloodied hand twined within his, seeking comfort. Fear seized her and with a glower, she set the remains aflame. Just a ghost. Naruto, if you ever cheat on me, I'll set you on fire. Oi, I already told you I'm never going to do that. If you ever betray me, I'll burn you, Naruto. Stop threatening me with fire, Alma. Then shut up and kiss me. Entropy interlude. Catch me if you can. Naruto arched an eyebrow and stifled a smile as Alma alighted on his shoulders. Before he could think to reach up and grab her, she twisted her hips and vaulted over him in a whirlwind of red-black silk. For one brief blessed moment he was graced with her beatific smile and a flashing expanse of her slender legs. Then she was gone, bounding ahead of him through the trees as though she'd been born to them. He nearly missed the next jump when he saw her land on her hands and spring away onto another looming bough like a graceful panther. Now she was just showing off. Golden eyes gleamed impishly at him in the dark. You're too slow. Take it easy, will you? He called out into the waxing moonlight. You're going too fast. Or maybe you're just too slow. Quick as you please, she sprang back to him and claimed her mouth with his own, slamming him against a tree trunk to press the fullness of her still swelling curves against him. Naruto stiffened in surprise, but even as he moved to reach for her to crush her against him, weld his lips to hers, she was gone again, a whisper on the wind. Hey! Distant giggling leaped through the leaves, though he'd long since lost sight of her. Slowpoke, slowpoke. With a rueful smile he loped after her, throwing himself to another branch as she vanished into the dark. Once more the world dissolved into a mottled blur of black and brown and green, but he paid them no mind nor any heed in his greed to catch up to her. If there was one thing he truly loved about this dusky goddess, it was her smile. Her personality. Alma Wade lived fiercely, loved fierce, and hated fiercely. Woe to you if you were the latter, but if she liked you, fell in love with you, well, there was nothing sweeter. Steadying himself against an ancient bough, he gathered his legs beneath him and leaped after her once more. True, the land of waves was a far cry from the sprawling forests of that the land of fire housed, but it still had its wooded areas worth traversing. Although this was Alma's own reluctant admission, the scenic route back to Tazuna and Team 7, he found himself in no hurry to return to them. Wouldn't the old bridge builder be surprised to learn they'd taken care of his problems? Zabuza and Gato dead and Hakuel. The less said about that one, the better. All at once the forest fell away beneath his feet alongside the last of the trees, and he found himself in a placid clearing that gave house to a small lake of sorts. The light of the full moon rose off it like a fell mirror, and for just a moment he took a moment to admire it. More so the girl dancing upon its flat surface. Forced to recalculate his trajectory, he nevertheless glimpsed a familiar head of dark hair in the distance as he alighted in a pointed crouch. Water dancing, huh? He called out to her. Haven't seen you do that in a while. Alma paid him no mind. Watching her skip across the water in the moonlight proved something of a novelty to him. More so when each step turned the temperate liquid to ice with each step. Within moments she had inadvertently frozen half of its surface, with the rest well on its way to becoming her domain. How odd. He'd always associated Alma with fire, for her to suddenly command the polar opposite, and damn if that pun didn't make him smile a little, brought a rather unpleasant question to his lips. Where did you learn how to do that? She gave him a sly look. Do you really want to know? Naruto suddenly and vividly recalled the horrors she'd inflicted on Haku. No, he smacked his lips, stifling a small shudder of his own. I don't think that I do. There was something mystifying about her smile just then. Still, it warmed his rotten soul. Yes, she was a terror to their enemies and a friend to those she loved. Yet for all the fear and terror she imposed, she still had her girlish moments. Who would have thought the terror of the leaf liked to dance? No one back in the village, certainly. They were all scared. Shitless of her. For good reason. Then those blazing eyes rounded on him, burning with the intensity of 1,000 suns, and he found himself reminded why. It likely had something to do with the now melting ice at her feet. Naruto, if you ever cheat on me, I'll set you on fire. The Jinchuriki sighed. He was no stranger to her mood swings, of course. He'd spent the better part of his life with her. At her core, Alma was a very sensitive girl. She knew only love and hate. There could never be any in-between for her. But even so, this sudden shift in mood startled him. Perhaps it had something to do with the creature they'd encountered. Zabuza certainly hadn't inspired much fear in her. The man's severed head was currently wrapped in a red sack alongside that of Gato and bound to his waist. No stranger to violence, he didn't much mind their weight. He did, however, mind this sudden turn. Taking a moment to steady himself, he stepped out onto the lake after Alma. Awkwardly at first because it had been ages since he'd winnowed out the secrets of water walking, but with increasing confidence he stalked to her side. Within 30 seconds he'd reached her, but she spun away from him at the last second with a lilting laugh and pirouetted out further onto the water's surface. With a long-suffering sigh born of great patience, the whiskered youth wandered after her, pointedly ignoring the warm water that lapped at his toes. "Where's this coming from?" he sighed. "I already told you I'm never going to do something like that." She danced on and continued singing, ignoring him utterly, as was her wont. "If you so much as look at another girl, I'll roast you alive, Naru." And I twitched. Yes, haha, very funny, Alma. "If you ever betray me, I'll burn you," she sang on, giving him an impish smile as she spun past in a swirl of silk. In that moment he wasn't sure if she was genuinely threatening or toying with him. Despite all the time they'd spent together, Alma could be erratic at times. Not that he minded these taunts and her never-ending japes. Just made life more exciting in the long run. What was the saying the old man used? Never a dull moment? Aha, that was the one. Still, he didn't much like the glee with which she had said that just now. "Stop threatening me with fire, Alma. Then shut up and kiss me." In a single flowing movement she rounded on him and leaped. Naruto always wondered just how she did that. Willed her body into motion and moved without moving. In a single bound she caught him in midair, locked both legs around his waist and welded her lips to his. Dark hair tickled his face and he laughed into her mouth as her tongue danced with his, drinking from her gladly as his hands settled against her thighs. Thus steadied against him, she made no move to extricate herself from him for a solid minute. "You said you'd do anything for me," she purred, stroking his face. "Is that still true?" A flicker of concern mounted in the back of Naruto's mind, but he nodded regardless. Her expression turned mischievous. "Good boy." Alma leaned closer still. Lips brushed his ear. "No, fuck me." Naruto tumbled back with a startled squawk as she vaulted off him and gave his chest a push. Arms flailed, clawing for a handhold and finding none. In the end, gravity had the final say. Alma watched, bemused, as her lover crashed backward into the water in a mighty splash and summarily sank to the bottom. She had no fear of him drowning and his pain didn't amuse her. Rather, his reaction did. Of course he must have known on some level that she wanted to have his babies, but for her to actually speak the words aloud was another matter. A tingle of anticipation raced through her as she splashed into the water, laughing, uncaring as she too lost her balance. "Alma," Naruto burst out of the water, sputtering like a drunkard. "That was a low blow. I could have drowned, dang it. All's fair in love and war." The dusky goddess only laughed harder and cut a handful of water at him. Within moments he joined her and splashed back. She loved her blonde buffono how she loved him, but sometimes he could be so wholeheartedly dense. Better this way, she decided. Better to drag him down into entropy with her and make her goals clear rather than wait for him to realize what she wanted at his own pace. With this, she'd made the first move. Now the rest was merely a matter of time. Yes, she decided this was going to be delicious. "Why are you laughing?" "Oh, no reason. I'm just amused. I've made a terrible mistake, haven't I?" Heads will roll. "We're back." Kakashi looked up from his book. "Oh, welcome home. Hope the two of you had..." Thunk. A dull thud answered his greeting with sound and aplomb. Fun. A gloved hand slapped against his forehead as Alma plunked Gato's severed head on the table before him with a proud smile. Naruto planted Zabuza's beside her prize a moment later with a grin that was nothing short of beatific. Somewhere in the background he heard Tazuna yelp. Inari toppled out backward out of his chair. Really, didn't know why they were surprised. They shouldn't be. The little monsters duo hadn't been seen for the better part of an evening now. They should have expected something like this. Judging by their frozen expressions, Zabuza and Gato had not died well. I see the two of you were busy. He blew out an exasperated sigh and pivoted to face them in his seat. Please tell me you didn't kill everyone. Alma tilted her head, the very picture of innocency if one ignored the bloodstains. Define everyone. Ignore her. Naruto pinched her cheek, drawing a whine from the pale goddess. We spared Haku. Haku. The fake hunter ninja, the blonde clarified. You know, the imposter. She begged to serve us by the end. She's waiting outside with Hinata. Alma informed him primly when he turned a lone eye on her. Don't worry. She's tame. Say what you would about Alma's methods and motives, but she didn't lack for passion. No, never that. She never did anything by halves. Love and hate were but two sides of the same coin for her. If she loved you, that was it. You were hers. Forever and ever and ever. She'd burn villages to the ground to keep you safe. Slaughter anyone who dared to lay a hand on you. There could be no stauncher ally than a protective Alma Wade. She'd go to hell and back for her loved ones. But if you upset her, betrayed her, attacked her, or gods forbid, if she came to hate you. Kakashi was looking at the results right now. Gato had made his bed and shit in it by the look of things. Even if they'd spared his life, he would have been dragged back to the hidden leaf for questioning. Ibiki would have been all too happy to tear into him. Maybe death was a mercy, then. He stole another glance at the severed heads gaping at him and blew out a restless sigh. Was that really necessary? Yup. Naruto beamed. Gato was a scumbag. This country will never see his kind again. Unlikely. Kakashi fought down a grimace. There were shinobi out there that made someone like Zabuza look like a tadpole. Much worse. Monsters that went bump in the night, immortals that couldn't die. Strong though he was, at the end of the day, the demon of the mist was just a big fish in a small pond. Moreover, poor Tazuna looked like he'd just bitten into a particularly sour lemon. Monsters, the man muttered, face ashen as he crossed himself. They're both monsters. They really were, weren't they? But at the end of the day, they were his monsters. In many ways, Alma was like a small child, or so Kakashi theorized. He'd seen her powers countless times, but this was the form she always used. For all her anger and hate, she was just a teenager. Naruto was her lifeline. He was all that held her in check, the sole restraint that prevented her madness from breaking free and destroying the world. If something happened to him, or heaven forbid, if he ever died, nope. Kakashi adamantly refused to think about it. Such unpleasant thoughts were dragons best left to slumber in the dark. So, Naruto posited, we can go home now, right? Well, I suppose so. Kakashi scratched his mask. Our mission was to protect Tazuna, and you've certainly done that, in a sense. After the spectacle you caused, no one's going to raise a hand against him for the foreseeable future. Maybe not ever, at that. Are you mad? Tazuna clambered upright, eyes wide. They just waltzed right into the man's base and killed him. His men too. Alma chirped happily. Didn't put up much of a fight, them. See, the portly man stabbed. Aren't you going to reprimand them? Why ever would I do that? They completed their mission. Right, that does it. Snatching up a bottle from the table, he stalked off. I'm entirely too sober for this. Where are you going? Naruto called after him. To build my bloody bridge, damn you. The door slammed loud in his wake. Inari was left behind to balk. Kakashi almost pitied the lad. It wasn't a kind thing to have your worldview shattered, let alone twice in one lifetime. Before, Inari had shouted at them, railed at them, condemned them. Now he gaped at them like a fish, gasping for air that wouldn't come. Poor kid. He shouldn't have to see such horrible things. You actually did it? He wouldn't even look at them. His gaze remained fixed on the ruined heads still bleeding all over the table. You killed Gato. I don't believe it. Alma raised her chin with a bemused smile. I seem to recall you saying that we couldn't stop him. That we would be the ones to die. The young boy blanched. I didn't mean it like that. No? The young psychic tilted her head. Then by all means, enlighten us. Naruto's voice rose in a rare objection. Don't torment the poor kid. Inari perked up and dared a watery smile. Maybe I was wrong about the two of you. You're not monsters. You're good people. Well, when you put it like that, Naruto scratched at a whiskered cheek, I guess we're not. Still, good guys? Alma colored to the very roots of her hair. She clearly wasn't accustomed to such naked praise. WB didn't do it for you, brat now get? In another lifetime, she would pranced and preened at being proven right. She clicked her teeth at the boy and sent him scurrying after his grandfather. He didn't stop smiling. The sight of it troubled Kakashi. He had the distinct feeling Naruto and Alma had just picked up a follower if not an outright worshipper thanks to their little display. Still, everything was alright. Wasn't it? The boy was happy, and it wasn't as if he was going to go around emulating their acts like some kind of vigilante in the future. Right? Kakashi shook his head again, feeling the beginnings of a migraine coming on. These two were going to dominate at the Chunin exams. Maybe a little too well. Naruto might well be a soft touch compared to someone like Alma, but she would happily butcher someone if they so much as looked at her the wrong way. And there would be no shortage of challengers this year. Unbidden, his mind flickered to a familiar face. Oh dear. His kids were going to lose it. Lee would probably take it into his head to challenge Naruto to a fight outright, or worse, fall for Alma. Ten would be frothing at the mouth once she saw that giant sword. And that Hyuga boy nope. Guy may well be his rival, not that Kakashi would ever admit it aloud, but bet or no, he didn't want to see his students dead. He certainly didn't need them maimed or mentally scarred. He'd heard tell of what Alma had done to Sasuke. Poor kid was still a wreck, confined to a wheelchair. He might never walk again. No, this required a gentle touch. He had to recommend Team 7 for the exams. To deny them, that would be a slight. Moreover, it would be a way of rewarding them for their work while simultaneously further tying them to the village. That was tricky enough as things stood. Naruto had no reason to be loyal, not when his hopes and dreams lay with Alma. In another life, he would have wanted to be Hokage. But he couldn't care less about the title, or what it had meant to his father. It hurt, seeing Minato's son like this. At his core, Naruto was still a good person, but only just. He didn't walk around slaughtering innocents for a lark, he didn't torture small animals like a psychopath, and he didn't revel in pain or bloodshed. But his morals were twisted. Warped. He didn't believe in light or dark anymore, nor black and white, but gray. Kakashi didn't know what to do with gray. If they pitted his loyalty to the leaf against Alma, something would break. He suspected it would be the village. So he said the fateful words early, and in doing so, sealed his fate forevermore. This may sound a bit sudden, he began slowly, choosing his words with great care, but I've decided to recommend you lot for the Chunin exams. Naruto and Alma went terribly still. For a moment they looked like statues. Had he broken them? They certainly looked startled enough for it. No, wait, there they went. A spark of triumph burned in Naruto's gaze, and a rare, genuine grin stole across his face. He chuckled. The sound made something quailed inside of the old Jonin. By contrast, Alma's smile proved nearly beatific, almost terrifyingly so. Is that so? She purred at him. How very kind of you. Kakashi swallowed thickly, trying not to sweat. I've made a horrible mistake, haven't I? He had absolutely no idea. We all change when you think about it, Alma. We're all different. All through our lives. And that's okay. That's good. You've got to keep moving. So long as you remember the people that you used to be, who you want to be, you'll be fine. Don't let fear hold you back. Don't let anger weight you down. Don't let sorrow trap you in the past. We won't be here forever. Sooner or later, we'll die. So in the meantime, let's just live. We've only got one life, after all, we should enjoy it. What a coincidence, I was thinking the same. Now lay down. Karma, second interlude. Gar liked to think he knew fear. You see, terror was something of an old friend. He inspired it in others, terrorized all who stood against him. His enemies feared him, and his allies didn't dare rouse his ire. He was fear incarnate. At least he had been. Until a few minutes ago. Until he'd seen a master at work. A chance encounter in the streets of this wretched village promised to wipe away all his boredom. On a certain level, Gaara could respect someone capable of inspiring mind-numbing dread with but a glance. He was more a connoisseur of gratuitous violence and gore himself, of spectacle over subtlety, yet in his line of work one learned to appreciate the finer points of terror and all that it entailed. Case in point, the corpse lying before him. Dead at a glance, Kenkuro's prone form gazed blankly at the sky, his face frozen in a rictus of horror. You see, he had died screaming, clawing at his face, trying to gouge his eyes out. Gar wondered why. Had his blood witnessed something so distressing that his heart simply gave out? Or was it sheer terror that did him? Blades had been drawn, no jutsu unleashed. Simply a crossword between two perfect strangers and a harsh look. Merely a glance, really. Just like that, his brother was dead and gone. But he'd never liked him anyway. Temari clambered backward with a shriek. What did you do to him? He was tormenting that boy. I hate bullies. The culprit showed no remorse as they walked over Kenkuro's prone form. Literally. Bare feet crunched over his twisted body, uncaring of the marks they made. Fiery footprints kissed the ground, leaving trails of fire where they walked. Before their very eyes the once proud puppeteer fell to ashes. Dust in the wind. A strong breeze caught his remains and blew them away. His gaze set upon her and narrowed, watching with intent. At a glance, she looked to be little more than a pale-skinned girl in a red dress. It was the eyes that gave her away. They were pits of balefire, framed by midnight black hair and a smile so serene as to be unnatural. She seemed to look right through them, as thought they were ants unto her, no less than ants. Bacteria. The mild curl of her lip seemed to suggest as much. She didn't even see the two of them as human. Well? She quirked a brow and planted a fist upon her hip. Care to try your luck? Temari found her voice at last. Monster murderer, I'll kill you for this. No, the strange girl declared with utter finality. You won't. Gaara frowned. Not another word, Temari. Gaara? She rounded on him with a snarl. But he killed our brother. He was weak. Blank green eyes narrowed upon her. I have no such brother. His gaze swept back to this goddess of death. Something clicked. She must have sensed it too, because she pivoted on one heel to regard him intently. Two monsters gazed upon one another. One forged in fire. Another of bloody sand. Neither yielded. Sparks snarled as their eyes met. You're like me. Gaara rasped, eyes widening. Perhaps I'll find my worth in killing you. Alma shrugged. You're welcome to try, but I wouldn't were I you. The redhead scowled. And why is that? Naruto's head peeked over her shoulder. Hello. Gaara recoiled. For if Alma Wade was fire and death and pain, the young man beside her was light. Not the good kind. Bright, blinding, scouring, the strong kind of light that burned everything away, friend and foe alike. Merely meeting his eyes threatened to bring on another attack. And yet for all that, there could be no denying his strength. If this was the mayhem the Chunin exams promised, then he looked forward to them. He would prove his existence by killing these two. So he swore. There would be blood. Without life there is not even a shred of fear. There can be no silence without sound.